Hello guys. Welcome to Pika Fiction. So in this video, we will see what if Ash was a prince from the past and woke up to claim his harem of Misty, May, and Dawn. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The echo in the heart. The air in the Cameron Range had a temper. One moment, it was crisp and cool, scented with pine and the clean, damp earth of the highlands. The next, a wind would shear down from the peaks, carrying a predatory chill that had nothing to do with the weather. Ash Ketchum pulled the collar of his jacket tighter, his eyes scanning the unnervingly silent forest. Even Pikachu, a perpetual ball of energetic crackles, was subdued on his shoulder, ears twitching at sounds Ash couldn't hear. "I'm just saying," Misty grumbled from behind him, deftly sidestepping a gnarled root that snaked across the path. "Professor Oak could have sent us an email. A very detailed email. Maybe with pictures." "Where's your sense of adventure, Mist?" May chimed in, her voice a warm contrast to the biting wind. She paused to help Dawn navigate a slippery patch of moss-covered rock. "This is way more exciting than sitting in a lab. My sense of adventure is currently frozen somewhere around my third vertebra," Misty shot back, though the corner of her mouth twitched. "And exciting is one word for it. Creepy is another. Have you noticed? No Pidgey. No Rattata. Nothing." She was right. The silence was the most unsettling part. This deep in a protected range, the woods should have been teeming with life. Instead, it felt like they were walking through a held breath. "Professor Oak said the aura readings were off the charts," Dawn reminded them, her brow furrowed in concentration. She adjusted the pink beanie on her head, her gaze fixed on the towering silhouette that dominated the skyline. "He said it was causing erratic behavioral patterns. Maybe they're all just hiding." The silhouette was their destination, the tree of beginning. It looked less like a plant and more like a mountain that had decided to grow leaves. A colossal, living monument of stone and flora that pierced the clouds, its form both awe-inspiring and, today, vaguely menacing. Pikachu murmured, a soft note of anxiety in his voice. Ash reached up and stroked the back of his partner's head, the familiar feel of his fur a small comfort. "We're almost there, buddy," Ash said, his own voice steady, a practiced calm he used to soothe his Pokémon and, more often than not, himself. At 19, he still carried the same boundless optimism he'd had at 10, but it was now tempered by the hard-won experience of countless battles. He knew when to be cautious, and every instinct he had was screaming at him now. "Whatever's going on, we'll figure it out." His confidence was a familiar anchor for the group. Misty rolled her eyes, but a hint of a smile betrayed her relief. May's shoulders relaxed slightly. Dawn gave him a grateful nod. They had been traveling together again for nearly a year, a reunion that had felt less like a decision and more like an inevitability. Their paths had diverged after Sinnoh, but they had orbited back to one another, their friendship a gravitational pull too strong to resist. It was easy, comfortable. Yet, underneath the familiar banter, something had shifted. Glances lingered a fraction of a second too long. A casual touch could send a spark through the air. It was a tension none of them had dared to name. As they cleared the final ridge, the full scale of the problem hit them. A massive herd of Tauros was stampeding in a frantic, mindless circle at the base of the tree, their hooves churning the earth into a muddy soup. Their eyes were wild, glowing with a faint, sickly purple light. High above, a flock of Fearow attacked each other in a chaotic aerial melee, their sharp cries echoing off the stone. "This is more than erratic," Misty breathed, her hand instinctively going to a Pokeball on her belt. "They're completely out of their minds." "That energy," Dawn said, pointing a gloved finger towards an opening at the tree's base, a cave-like entrance framed by roots as thick as buses. "It's coming from in there. It feels sour." Ash's jaw tightened. "Okay. New plan. We're not just here to observe. We have to stop this." He looked back at the three of them, his gaze firm. "We need to get to the heart of the tree. That's where the central crystal is. If the corruption is coming from there, we can cut it off at the source." "Through a stampede of enraged Tauros?" May asked, though she was already pulling a great ball from her bag. "We go over it," Ash declared, his eyes on the thick, low-hanging roots that clung to the tree's base. "Pikachu, you're with me."
Everyone else, call out who you need. Let's move. There was no hesitation. The years of traveling together had forged them into a seamless unit. Staraptor, let's fly, Ash yelled, tossing his own ball. The predator Pokemon burst forth with a piercing cry, his wingspan blotting out the sky. Seconds later, May's Beautifly and Dawn's Togekiss joined the fray, their smaller forms zipping through the air. Misty, ever the pragmatist, sent out her Starmie. Use Psychic to clear a path. Push them back. The battle was a controlled chaos. Staraptor created powerful gusts of wind to disorient the Fearow, while Starmie's Psychic Wave forced a gap in the frenzied Tauros herd. Ash, with Pikachu clinging to his back, used the opening to sprint towards the tree, leaping onto a low root and beginning the treacherous climb. The girls were right behind him, their Pokemon providing cover as they scaled the living rock face.
They reached the cave entrance, breathless and hearts pounding. The air rushing out from within was cold and carried a low, humming vibration that made their teeth ache. The sickly purple glow pulsed from the darkness like a diseased heart. "Whatever's in there," May whispered, recalling her Beautifly, "it's not happy to see us." "Good," Ash said, a grim smile on his face as he recalled Staraptor. The feeling's mutual. They drew close, a tight-knit unit against the encroaching dark. Ash took the lead, with Pikachu now perched on his shoulder, cheeks sparking. Misty and May flanked him, while Dawn brought up the rear, her eyes scanning the shadows. The tunnel sloped downward, the natural stone giving way to walls carved with intricate patterns that seemed to absorb the light. The humming grew louder, resonating in their bones. The tunnel opened into a vast, circular chamber. In the center, a colossal, crystalline heart, the core of the Tree of Beginning, hung suspended by thick, vein-like roots. But it was dying. Instead of its usual healthy, blue luminescence, it flickered with a virulent purple. Shadowy, ethereal tendrils snaked across its surface, pulsing in time with the nauseating hum. Standing before it were 5 figures cloaked in black and gray, their faces hidden by masks carved to resemble the grim visage of a Dusknoir. Before Ash could even shout a warning, the central figure turned, his movements fluid and unnaturally fast. He wore no mask. He was young, perhaps their age, with sharp, aristocratic features and silver hair that seemed to absorb the chamber's dim light. His eyes, a piercing shade of violet, fixed on Ash with an unnerving mix of shock and utter contempt. "You." The young man hissed, the word echoing in the cavernous space. "You have his face." The 4 masked figures moved at once, fanning out in a practiced formation. From their sides, 4 powerful Pokemon materialized. A hulking Metagross, a sleek Weavile, a menacing Drapion, and a ghostly Chandelure. "Who are you?" Ash demanded, stepping forward, his friends moving with him. "What are you doing to the tree?" The silver-haired man laughed, a cold, sharp sound devoid of humor. "We are the Hand of Umbra. We are surgeons, cutting away the world's weakness. This place, this monument to a failed ideology, is merely the first incision." He gestured dismissively at Ash. "As for you, you are an unexpected complication. An echo of a coward." "Valerius," he said, his voice dropping, his eyes burning with a sudden, intense hatred. "My name is Valerius, and you will not leave this chamber." The battle erupted without another word. It was unlike any they had ever fought. The Hand of Umbra moved with chilling synergy. The Metagross, clearly Valerius's ace, was a psychic juggernaut, its meteor mash attacks leaving craters in the stone floor. "Pikachu, use Thunderbolt on the Metagross," Ash commanded. "Blaziken, let's go." Sky Uppercut. May yelled. "Starmie, Ice Beam on the Weavile." Misty ordered. "Piplup, Spotlight. Use Bubble Beam." Dawn cried. Their attacks were powerful, born of years of training, but the enemy was on another level. Valerius didn't even shout commands. A subtle gesture, a slight inclination of his head, was all his Metagross needed. A shimmering psychic barrier intercepted the Thunderbolt. The Metagross then used agility to sidestep Blaziken's fiery attack, countering with a hammer arm that sent May's Pokemon staggering back. Weavile moved like a blur, its night slash deflecting the Ice Beam before it could even fully form. Drapion's cross poison pinned Piplup, forcing Dawn to recall him. "They're too coordinated," Misty yelled, gritting her teeth as Starmie was slammed against a wall by a shadow ball from the Chandelure. It's like they know what we're going to do before we do it. Valerius watched, a look of detached disappointment on his face. Is this the best you can muster? Pathetic. Your strategies are so childish. You rely on brute force and the shallow concept you call bonds. Friendship is not a tactic, it is a liability. He pointed a single finger at Ash, Meteor Mash. The Metagross became a steel comet, hurtling directly towards Pikachu. Pikachu, quick attack, dodge it, Ash yelled.
But as Pikachu zipped to the left, the Weavile was already there, cutting him off with a brutal ice shard. The super effective hit sent Pikachu tumbling through the air, landing hard near Ash's feet.
Pikachu! Ash cried, dropping to one knee. Predictable, Valerius sighed. You value your Pokemon's safety over tactical advantage. A fatal flaw. His eyes hardened. End it. Use Shadow Claw. One of the masked figures nodded. The Drapion's claws glowed with a ghastly dark energy as it scuttled towards the stunned Pikachu. There was no time to react, no time to issue another command. The strike was a guaranteed finish. In that split second, Ash didn't think. He moved. He threw himself in front of Pikachu, his arms spread wide, shielding his partner with his own body. He braced for the impact, the searing pain. The Shadow Claw never connected. Instead, a bolt of pure, dark energy lanced out from the corrupted crystal heart behind Valerius. It wasn't aimed at Ash, but at the chaotic energy of the battle itself. But Ash, in his desperate act of protection, had placed himself directly in its path. The bolt struck him square in the back, but there was no pain. There was only light. A blinding, searing whiteness that vaporized the world. And then, the memories came. Not his own. A castle of white stone burning against a blood-red sky. The scent of ozone, steel, and death. The roar of 1,000 battling Pokémon, a symphony of destruction. The faces of 3 women, their eyes filled with tears and fierce devotion. One with hair like fire, gripping a trident. One with hair the color of warm earth, her hand glowing with green light. One with hair like the midnight sky, a single, shimmering crystal on her brow. Myrella. Mela. Dia. A voice, his own, but deeper, laced with regal authority and despair. You cannot, your life force. It will not be enough. Their reply, in unison, a chorus in his soul. For you, our prince. For Aethelgard. Always.
A golden light, a searing pain in his chest, not from a wound but from a profound loss. The feeling of his own aura being woven into a cage of sleep, a 1,000-year slumber, sealed within the heart of a great tree. The final, whispered word from his most loyal companion, a Lucario, fading as consciousness slipped away. Rest, Prince Aslan. We will wait.
The flood of 1,000 years crashed into the mind of a 19-year-old boy. The memories, the love, the rage, the duty, the soul of Prince Aslan of Aethelgard, shattered the seal that had held it dormant for a millennium. Back in the chamber, the world snapped back into focus. The bolt of dark energy had dissipated, absorbed into Ash's body like a raindrop into the ocean. From him, an explosion of pure, brilliant blue aura erupted, a shockwave of power that threw everyone, friend and foe, off their feet. The corrupted crystal in the center of the room pulsed erratically, the shadow tendrils receding from the sheer purity of the energy. Ash stood up slowly. His posture had changed. The slight, eager slouch of the trainer was gone, replaced by a straight-backed, unshakable stillness. He lifted his head, and the eyes that opened were not just Ash's warm brown. They were deeper, older, filled with the light of ancient suns and the sorrow of a lost kingdom. The boy was gone. A king stood in his place. He looked at Pikachu, who was staring up at him, bewildered. A faint, sad smile touched his lips. Forgive me, old friend. I had forgotten myself. Then, he turned his gaze to Valerius. The air in the chamber grew heavy, charged with an immense pressure that seemed to emanate from Ash alone. Valerius, clutching a rock for support, stared back, his arrogance replaced by a dawning, horrified disbelief. What is this power? Ash took a single step forward, and the stone floor cracked under his boot. His voice, when he spoke, was unnervingly calm, resonating with a power that vibrated in their very souls. It was Ash's voice, yet it was not. You, he said, his ancient eyes locking onto the terrified young man, who desecrate this sacred place, who ally with the shadow that feasts on life. You are not worthy to speak my name. Pikachu leapt onto his shoulder, no command given, and the two moved as one. It wasn't a charge. It was a flow. Ash pointed, and Pikachu fired a thunderbolt. It was not the wild, explosive blast from before. This was a spear of pure lightning, precise and controlled, striking the Chandelure and shattering its spectral form in a single, silent flash. The Metagross unleashed another meteor mash. Ash didn't even flinch. Left, he murmured. Pikachu was already there, a yellow blur running up the Metagross's rising arm. Iron Tail. The command was an afterthought. Pikachu's tail glowed like forged steel, slamming down on the psychic Pokemon's head with impossible force and precision, striking a nerve cluster. The Titan of Steel seized up, its psychic energy short-circuiting, and it crashed to the ground, unconscious.
2 Pokemon, defeated in less than 5 seconds. The remaining members of the Hand of Umbra were frozen, paralyzed by the sudden, terrifying shift in power. Valerius stared, his face ashen. The aura pouring from Ash. It wasn't the unrefined energy of a novice. It was controlled, ancient, overwhelming. It was the aura of the legends, the aura of the prince his bloodline had sworn to despise.
Impossible. Valerius stammered, scrambling backward. The coward prince. He was sealed, he fled. You were told a lie, Ash said, his voice laced with a profound weariness. He took another step. Now, leave this place. Or be erased. That broke the spell. The masked figures grabbed their fallen Pokemon and vanished into the shadowed tunnels from which they'd come. Valerius gave Ash one last look of pure, unadulterated terror, then turned and fled, his tactical brilliance forgotten in the face of a living myth. Silence descended upon the chamber. The purple glow of the crystal had receded, replaced by a weak but steady blue. The oppressive hum was gone. Ash? Misty's voice was a trembling whisper. May and Dawn were huddled beside her, their faces a mask of confusion, fear, and awe. The immense pressure emanating from him vanished. The ancient light in his eyes flickered, replaced by a look of profound exhaustion. His body swayed, the weight of 2 lifetimes crashing down on him. He staggered, and then his legs gave out. He collapsed to the stone floor. Ash! The 3 girls cried in unison, rushing to his side. As they knelt beside his unconscious form, a shimmering blue light began to coalesce near the now healing heart of the tree. The light solidified, taking the form of a tall, bipedal Pokemon with black and blue fur, its crimson eyes glowing with wisdom and sorrow. It carried a staff, and its presence filled the room with a sense of peace and immense age. It was a Lucario. But not just any Lucario. It knelt, placing a 3-fingered hand on Ash's chest. A calm, masculine voice echoed not in their ears, but directly in their minds, a voice that carried the weight of 1,000 years of faithful vigil. The prince. He has awakened. The Lucario then turned its solemn gaze upon the 3 terrified young women huddled around their fallen friend. Its crimson eyes softened with a look of profound, heartbreaking recognition. And you, my ladies, you have finally come home. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. The Weight of 1,000 Years. The first thing Ash felt was the cold, unyielding stone beneath him. The second was a headache that felt a millennium in the making. It wasn't the throbbing pain of a physical blow, but the seismic pressure of 2 lives, 2 sets of memories, 2 souls attempting to occupy the same space. He was Ash Ketchum, the 19-year-old from Pallet Town who dreamed of being a Pokemon master. And he was Oslon, Crown Prince of Aethelgard, a warrior king who had seen his world burn and had slept in stone for 1,000 years. The memories were not a film he could watch. They were his. He remembered the precise weight of his father's crown, the taste of wine at a royal banquet, the feeling of Myrella's hand in his during a walk through the palace gardens, the sting of a poison-tipped arrow in his side during the Battle of the Crimson Plains. He remembered learning to throw a Pokeball with Professor Oak and the joy of meeting Pikachu. It was all there, a chaotic, contradictory storm in his mind. He groaned, pushing himself up on one elbow. His vision swam into focus. Misty, May, and Dawn were kneeling a few feet away, their expressions a mixture of fear and profound concern. Pikachu was on his chest, nudging his chin, a worried chirp rumbling in his throat. And standing over them all, a silent, blue-furred sentinel, was the Lucario. Ash. Are you okay? May asked, her voice soft. The name was an anchor. Ash. He clung to it. Yeah. I think so, he managed, his voice raspy. He sat up, shaking his head to clear the mental fog. What? What happened? You tell us, Misty said, her arms crossed. Her usual brashness was a thin shield over a trembling uncertainty. One minute you're taking a hit for Pikachu, the next you're someone else. You took out 2 of their Pokémon in seconds and scared them off without breaking a sweat.
Before Ash could try to formulate an answer he didn't have, the Lucario's voice filled their minds again. It was a strange sensation, words that bypassed the ears and bloomed directly in the consciousness.
He is himself. And he is more. The Lucario knelt, its crimson eyes meeting Ash's. There was no mistaking the loyalty, the relief, the sorrow in that gaze. My prince. I feared this day would never come. Prince? Dawn whispered, looking from Ash to the Lucario. He called you that before. What does it mean? It is what he is, the Lucario explained, turning its attention to the 3 of them. What you all are. Your memories are still dormant, sealed by the passage of time. But his, shattered by the Umbra's energy, have returned. Ash got to his feet, feeling steadier than he expected. The prince's posture came naturally. He stood taller, his presence more grounded. He looked at the Lucario, and a name surfaced from the depths of his new memories. Sir Aaron. No, that wasn't right. That was another story. You are mine. I am. The Lucario confirmed with a mental bow. My name has been lost to all but you. When Aethelgard fell, and the shadow we call the Umbra threatened to consume the world, you were mortally wounded. To save you, and to preserve the hope of the world, your 3 guardians sacrificed their life force to seal you within the tree's heart. A hibernation, to last until the Umbra returned, and until their own souls could be reborn. The Lucario extended a hand, not physically, but with its aura. A shimmering blue image flickered into existence in the center of the chamber, a vision woven from memory and energy. They saw a gleaming white city, a majestic castle, and a younger version of Ash, of Aslan. Laughing with 3 women who were unmistakably them. A fiery-haired Myrella sparring with him. A gentle, brunette Mela tending to a garden of glowing flora. A sharp, raven-haired Dia poring over ancient scrolls. That's, May breathed, her hand flying to her mouth. It can't be, Misty insisted, but her voice lacked conviction. She was staring at the image of Myrella, at the fierce, determined set of her jaw, and seeing a reflection she recognized. You are Lady Myrella, the shield of the prince, the Lucario's voice intoned, the image shifting to show Misty's counterpart raising a trident, a wall of water erupting around her to protect Aslan. You are Lady Mela, the voice of the court, it continued, the vision now showing May's ancestor calming a rampaging Rhyhorn with a single touch and a soft word. And you are Lady Dia, the vision of the future, it finished, as Dawn's past self touched a crystal, her eyes glowing as she warned the prince of an impending ambush. The final image was of the 3 of them, surrounding a dying Aslan, their hands glowing as they poured their lives, their very souls, into the Lucario, who then channeled that energy into the prince, sealing him away. The vision dissolved, leaving the 4 of them in a stunned, echoing silence. Misty was the first to break it, shaking her head fiercely. No, I don't believe it. Past lives? A prince? An ancient evil? This is insane. Ash, she pleaded, turning to him. Are you hearing this? Tell me this is some kind of psychic trick. Ash looked at her, and his gaze was heavy with the truth he couldn't deny. I wish I could, Misty. But I remember it. I remember all of it. He ran a hand through his perpetually messy hair, a gesture that was pure Ash, yet the conflict in his eyes was all Aslan. I need to see what the world has become. He looked at the tunnel leading out. We have to go, now. He was already moving, his stride purposeful. The girls exchanged a look of bewilderment before scrambling to follow, with Lucario falling into step silently behind them. Ash insisted they call him Ash, a desperate attempt to hold onto a piece of the life that, just an hour ago, had been his only reality. But the man leading them out of the tree of beginning was not the same one who had entered. The easygoing warmth was still there, but it was banked, like embers under a layer of ash, overshadowed by a new, chilling gravitas. They traveled for 2 days, descending from the highlands. Ash was mostly silent, observing everything with an unnerving intensity. He watched the way trainers battled casually on the road, the noisy, disorganized bustle of the small towns they passed through, The headlines on the newspapers in shop windows detailing petty crimes and political squabbles. To the girls, it was normal. To the mind of a prince from a unified kingdom built on order and mutual defense, it was utter chaos. "It's all so fractured," he murmured as they sat in a small cafe in Pewter City, the noise of traffic and chatter pressing in on them. Everyone is for themselves. They squabble over trivial things. This world, it's a feast waiting to be consumed. "It's called living," May said gently. "People have their own lives, their own problems." "These are not problems," he countered, his voice low and sharp. "They're luxuries. In my time, a squabble between guilds could weaken a border. A weak border meant an incursion. An incursion meant death. This carelessness is how the Umbra first took root. It feeds on discord." Before they could respond, a commotion erupted down the street. A woman was shouting, pointing at a trio of figures who were hastily loading crates of Pokeballs from a store into the back of a beat-up truck. A man with ridiculously vibrant blue hair, a woman with a gravity-defying magenta mane, and a Meowth. "Team Rocket," Misty sighed, a note of familiar annoyance in her voice. "Some things never change." But Ash wasn't annoyed. His eyes had gone cold, his posture straightening. He watched as James dropped a crate, sending Pokeballs scattering, and as Jessie berated him, their movements sloppy and inefficient. He saw not a comedic nuisance, but a symptom of the disease he just described. Agents of chaos, profiting from the weakness of others. "They are a cancer," he stated, his voice flat. He stood up. "Ash, wait," Dawn began. "We can just call Officer Jenny." He was already moving. "There's no time." He moved with a speed that shocked them, cutting through the panicked crowd. "Pidgeot," he roared, throwing a Pokeball high into the air. The magnificent bird materialized, its wingspan casting a massive shadow. "Hurricane, trap them." The command was absolute. Pidgeot obeyed instantly, flapping its wings to create a miniature cyclone that tore through the square. It wasn't a warning shot. It was a tactical maneuver. The vortex of wind wasn't aimed at Team Rocket directly, but around them, creating a barrier of furious air and flying debris that contained them and their truck, preventing any escape. Civilians screamed and ran for cover. "Pikachu, full power," Ash commanded, his voice devoid of emotion as he pointed at the trapped truck. "Thunderbolt." Pikachu, ever loyal, leapt from his shoulder, cheeks sparking violently, preparing to unleash a torrent of electricity powerful enough to melt the truck's frame. "Ash, no." Misty's voice cut through the roar of the wind. She had run after him, and now she grabbed his arm, pulling with all her might. "Stop. Look around you. You'll kill them. You could hurt someone." He turned to face her, and the look in his eyes made her blood run cold. It was the prince. All Prince. There was no trace of the boy she'd traveled with, argued with, and secretly cared for. There was only a wartime general making a calculated decision. "They are a festering wound," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "They promote chaos for personal gain. That chaos weakens the fabric of this world and allows the shadow to seep in. They must be excised. Mercy is a luxury we lost 1,000 years ago." The words struck her like a physical blow. This cold, ruthless logic. It was alien. It was terrifying. "That's not you," she yelled back, her grip on his arm tightening, her knuckles white. "The Ash I know wouldn't do this. He finds another way." "The Ash you know didn't see his kingdom fall to dust," he snarled, his control finally cracking. The raw agony of 1,000 years of loss bled through his voice. The standoff was broken by May, who came up beside them, placing a gentle hand on Ash's other arm. She didn't shout. She just looked into his eyes, her own filled with a desperate plea. "Ash. Please. He's still in there. Don't let the prince be all you are." Her touch, her soft words, seemed to bypass the king and reach the boy. Ash flinched as if burned. He looked from her face to Misty's, then at the terrified Pikachu, who had paused his attack, looking to his trainer for guidance. He saw the chaos his own actions had caused. The screaming people, the damage from the hurricane. He saw the reflection of a monster in Misty's horrified eyes. He recoiled, pulling his arm from her grasp. "Pidgeot, cease," he choked out. The hurricane died as quickly as it had formed. In the sudden silence, Team Rocket, never ones to miss an opportunity, scrambled into their truck and sped away, disappearing around a corner. Ash didn't even watch them go. He was staring at his own hands, trembling slightly. The cold certainty of the prince was gone, replaced by the sickening horror of the trainer. He had been ready to kill them, over a simple robbery. The three girls stood in the quiet of their shared hotel room that evening. The city hummed outside the window, oblivious. Ash was in the adjacent room, having shut himself away the moment they'd arrived, refusing to speak to anyone. The silence he'd left behind was heavier than any argument. "I don't understand," May said, pacing back and forth. "He's never been like that." It was like looking at a stranger. "That's because he is a stranger," Misty retorted, sitting rigidly on the edge of her bed. "That thing he said. Mercy is a luxury. Who says that?" She wrapped her arms around herself, shivering. "I was actually afraid of him." Dawn, who had been quiet until now, was staring out the window, her reflection pale in the glass. Maybe Lucario was right. Misty and May turned to look at her. "What do you mean?" May asked. "I'm scared too," Dawn admitted, turning to face them. "But I'm also, I don't know, confused." When he was standing there, in the square, when he looked so cold and powerful, I saw something. "Saw what?" Misty pressed. Dawn's gaze became distant, unfocused. "A flash. Just for a second. It was like a memory, but not mine. I saw a king, standing on a castle balcony. And he wasn't alone." She looked at Misty, then at May, her eyes wide with a dawning, terrifying understanding. "It was us. We were standing by his side." Chapter 2 end. Chapter 3. The trial of the shield. The silence in the morning was worse than the argument had been. They sat around a small table in a nondescript diner, the clatter of cutlery from other patrons feeling miles away. May poked at her pancakes. Dawn stirred a sugar packet into her tea over and over. Misty stared into her mug of hot chocolate as if it held the secrets to the universe. None of them looked at Ash. He sat across from them, the Lucario, a silent, stoic presence standing behind his chair, its arms crossed. The internal storm in Ash's mind had not subsided, but a fragile calm had been found in its eye. He knew what he had to do. The prince knew strategy, but the trainer knew friendship, and he had broken theirs. "I'm sorry," he said, the words quiet but clear, cutting through the tension. 3 sets of eyes darted up to meet his. "For what happened in Pewter City," he continued, meeting each of their gazes in turn. "There's no excuse for it. I lost control. I let the other part of me take over. The part that only sees threats and tactics, not people." He looked down at his hands, which were steady now. "When I saw Team Rocket, I didn't see Jesse and James. I saw soldiers of the chaos that destroyed my home. And I reacted like a king at war, not a friend in a city square. I was wrong. And I scared you. For that, more than anything, I am truly sorry." The sincerity in his voice was undeniable. It was Ash. Their Ash. The apology wasn't a strategic maneuver. It was a genuine, painful admission of fault. May was the first to break. "We were just worried, Ash." "Worried?" Misty scoffed, though the hard edge in her voice had softened. "I thought you were going to level the block. You looked at me like you didn't even know who I was." "I knew," Ash said, his voice raw. "That's what scared me. Part of me knew it was wrong, but the prince. Aslan. His memories are so loud. His grief is immense. He failed to protect everyone he ever loved. He won't let it happen again. He sees any threat, no matter how small, as the first step toward another apocalypse." He looked up, his expression pleading. "I'm not him. But I'm not just me anymore, either. I'm trying to figure out how to be both." A fragile truce settled over the table. The honesty had been a necessary bomb. "So what now?" Dawn asked, finally pushing her teacup aside. "We can't just keep traveling and hope you don't declare war on a purse snatcher." "No," Ash agreed, his focus sharpening. The prince was re-emerging, but this time, he was tempered by the trainer's empathy. "We fight back. Not blindly. Strategically. The Hand of Umbra, this Valerius. They aren't just thugs. They're poisoning sacred places, sites of immense aura. The Tree of Beginning was the first. They're trying to weaken the world's natural defenses, to make it easier for the true Umbra to break through." He is correct. Lucario's voice entered their minds. "There are sanctums across the land, ancient places of power tied to the elements. The Hand will seek to corrupt them all. Then that's where we go, Ash declared, a new, decisive energy in his voice. We get there first. We protect them. We purify them. He looked directly at Misty, his gaze intense. And we start near your home. Cerulean City. Misty recoiled slightly. Cerulean. Why? Because of the Cradle of the Tides, he said, a name that surfaced from Aslan's memories. An ancient sanctum hidden in the cliffs of Route 24. A place where the aura of the sea is at its most pure. A place deeply connected to you, Myrella. He used the name. Not as an accusation, but as a statement of fact. Misty flinched, the sound of it both alien and strangely familiar. Before she could protest, Ash was already standing, leaving money on the table. We don't have time to waste. The fate of the world literally depends on it. The journey to Cerulean was different. The awkward tension was replaced by a charged, focused energy. Ash was their leader now, not by default, but by design. He navigated with an unerring sense of direction, pointing out landmarks only he could see, remnants of an ancient world hidden beneath the veneer of the modern one. He showed them faint lines of power in the earth, explained the migratory patterns of Pokémon not as a trainer, but as a man who understood the planet as a living being. When they reached the cliffs north of Cerulean City, he led them away from the beaten path, towards a sheer rock face that seemed impassable. He placed his hand on the stone, and his aura flared, a soft blue. The rock shimmered, and a section dissolved into an archway, revealing a hidden cove beyond. The sight that met them should have been beautiful. It was a massive sea cave, the walls embedded with luminous pearls and strange, glowing coral. A natural waterfall cascaded from a hole in the ceiling, feeding a deep, central pool of what should have been crystal clear water. But it was corrupted. The water was a sickly, murky green, coated in a foul-smelling algae. The glowing coral pulsed with a weak, dying light. The air was heavy with the stench of decay and a low, dissonant hum that vibrated in their chests. Dozens of water-type Pokémon, Horsey, Staryu, Goldeen, floated listlessly at the surface, their eyes glowing with the same faint, purple sickness they had seen in the Tauros. They've been here already, May whispered, covering her nose. They're still here, Ash said, his eyes scanning the shadows. They're using this poison to draw something out. Something powerful. As if on cue, a deep, agonized roar echoed from the depths of the central pool. The water churned violently, and a massive form burst from the surface. It was a Gyarados, its serpentine body thrashing in a blind fury, its eyes burning with a maddened purple light. A thick, black collar of jagged metal was clasped around its neck, pulsing with dark energy. It was a device, a tool of corruption. Misty gasped, her blood running cold. She knew this Gyarados. The scar above its left eye, the slightly chipped crest. It's mine, she breathed in horror. I left him here to guard the sanctum while I was away. He has been guarding it well, Ash said grimly, but they've turned his strength against him. From the shadows around the cove, 5 figures in the gray and black cloaks of the Hand of Umbra emerged, taking up positions on the ledges above. They were grunts, not commanders, but their Pokémon, a Toxicroak, a Gengar, a Muck, materialized beside them, ready for battle. The intruders have arrived, one of them rasped. The matriarch will be pleased. The beast's rage is at its peak. Suicune will be drawn by the discord soon. Ash drew himself up. May, Dawn, you're with me. We'll handle the welcoming committee. Lucario, protect the entrance. No one gets in or out. He then turned to Misty, his expression hardening with a difficult resolve. Misty. The Gyarados is your fight. What? She stammered. Ash, he's out of control, I can't fight him. You won't, he said, his voice firm, leaving no room for argument. You will save him. In the old world, Lady Myrella was my shield. Her aura was that of the sea. She could calm the most violent storms and soothe the most enraged leviathans. That power is inside you. This place is your domain. The poison in this water, the device on your Gyarados. It's an infection. And you are the only one who can cure it. I don't know how, she cried, her confidence shattered in the face of her Pokémon's agony. Then you'd better find out, he yelled, his voice sharp as steel. He was already turning away, Pikachu leaping to the ground, cheeks sparking. May, Blaziken, Dawn, Mamoswine. Let's clear the field. The battle ignited. Ash, May, and Dawn worked as a coordinated unit against the 5 Umbra agents. Ash was their strategist, calling out weaknesses and directing their attacks with the calm precision of a seasoned general. But his focus was divided. He kept casting glances back at Misty, his jaw tight with a mixture of hope and fear. Misty was frozen, watching her enraged Gyarados slam its body against the cavern walls, roaring in pain. It didn't recognize her. It saw only another threat. It opened its maw and fired a hyper beam, not at her, but wildly at the ceiling. Rocks and debris rained down. "Starmie, go!" she yelled, tossing her Pokeball. "Use Psychic to get that collar off him." Starmie unleashed a wave of psychic energy, but as it neared Gyarados, the collar flared with dark power, repelling the attack. Gyarados turned its maddened gaze on Starmie and retaliated with a brutal dragon rage, sending Misty's most reliable Pokémon crashing into the pool. "No!" Misty cried. This was impossible. Every instinct she had as a trainer was screaming at her to fight, to overpower, to subdue. But Ash's words echoed in her head. "You are the only one who can cure it." She watched as Ash, in the background, moved with a fluid grace she'd never seen, directing Pikachu to use Volt Tackle not as a blunt instrument, but to ricochet off a wall and strike a Toxicroak from behind. He was trusting her to handle this. He was leaving her completely, terrifyingly alone. "Come on, Gyarados, it's me," she screamed, tears of frustration blurring her vision. "Snap out of it."
Her plea was answered with another roar of fury. Gyarados lunged, its massive head crashing down where she'd been standing just a second before. She scrambled back, her heart hammering against her ribs. She was cornered, backed against the wall of the cave, her Pokémon defeated, her friend in agony. She was helpless.
"I cannot do this for you, Myrella," Ash's voice roared from across the cavern, cutting through the din of battle. "This is your trial. Find yourself. Be the shield." His words, the ancient name, the impossible command, it was the final catalyst. Desperation, love for her Pokémon, and a primal fear of failure ignited something deep within her soul. The seal on her own memories, on her own power, cracked. A brilliant, cerulean blue aura exploded from her, pushing back the oppressive gloom of the cavern. It didn't feel like Ash's powerful, commanding energy. It was fluid, gentle, and yet possessed the unstoppable power of a rising tide. She felt it connect her not just to the water in the pool, but to the very essence of water itself. She looked at Gyarados, and for the first time, she didn't just see its rage. Through her newfound aura, she felt it. She felt the searing pain of the dark energy from the collar, the confusion, the fear, the desperate struggle of her loyal Pokémon trapped within its own mind. It wasn't angry at her, it was screaming for help. "Oh, Gyarados," she whispered, the tears flowing freely now, but they were tears of empathy, not fear. "I'm so sorry, I feel it." She stepped forward, into the shallow water, her own blue aura mingling with the corrupted green of the pool. She didn't shout. She didn't command. She reached out with her hand and her will, projecting not an order, but a feeling. Peace, calm, a memory of floating in the quiet waters of the cerulean gym pool. Gyarados paused its thrashing, its head cocked. It felt the shift. The rage was still there, but a new sensation was washing over it, a cool, familiar current in the fire of its pain. Misty walked deeper into the water, her aura flaring brighter. The foul green began to recede around her, the water clearing in her presence. "It's okay," she said, her voice a soothing balm. "I'm here now. Let me help you." She placed her hand on its massive, scaled snout. The contact sent a jolt through both of them. She poured her aura, her calm, her love, directly into her Pokémon. She wasn't fighting the darkness, she was overwhelming it with light, diluting the poison with purity. The dark collar around Gyarados' neck began to smoke and spark as her pure aura overloaded its foul magic. With a final, ear-splitting crack, the metal shattered and fell away, sinking into the depths. The purple light in Gyarados' eyes flickered and died, replaced by its normal, intelligent gaze. It let out a low, weary rumble and rested its massive head against her shoulder, finally at peace. As Misty healed her Pokémon, the sanctum healed with her. The pool began to clear, the sickly green giving way to a vibrant, shimmering blue. The glowing coral on the walls flared back to life. The oppressive hum was replaced by a gentle, harmonious chime. The remaining Umbra agents stared in disbelief, their Pokémon already defeated by Ash and the others. Impossible. The poison. It's being neutralized. One of them gasped. Before they could react, the water of the central pool began to glow. It rose into the air, forming a swirling vortex that solidified into the elegant, majestic form of Suicune. The legendary Pokémon surveyed the scene, its gaze falling on the defeated agents, then on Ash and the others, before finally settling on Misty and the now docile Gyarados. It took a step forward across the surface of the water and bowed its head to her, a clear sign of respect and gratitude. Then, as silently as it had appeared, it dissolved into a flurry of crystalline water and vanished. Ash found her standing on the shore, soaked and exhausted, her Gyarados floating peacefully beside her. The other girls hung back, sensing this was a private moment. He stopped a few feet from her, his face unreadable. The battle was over, the agents tied up and their communication devices smashed. The sanctum was safe. But the look in his eyes wasn't one of simple victory. It was awe. He was looking at her as if seeing her for the very first time. "My shield," he said, his voice soft, the name now feeling less like a title and more like an endearment. Misty looked up at him, a blush rising on her cheeks despite the chill. I did it." "You did," he agreed, closing the distance between them. He reached out and gently brushed a stray, wet strand of her orange hair from her face. His touch was warm, and it sent an electric jolt through her that had nothing to do with aura. "You were magnificent." The connection between them was palpable, a silent current of shared history and newfound power. It was a bond forged not just in friendship, but in the crucible of a battle 1,000 years in the making. He didn't pull away, his thumb gently stroking her cheek. In that moment, surrounded by the light of the healed sanctum, they were not a trainer and a gym leader. They were a prince and his guardian, finding each other again across the vast ocean of time. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The voice of the land. The salt spray of the sea was a constant mist on the Farah's deck, tasting of freedom and fresh starts. Hoenn was a smudge of emerald green on the horizon, growing larger with each passing hour. The journey from Kanto had been a blur of logistics. A quick flight arranged by a bewildered but cooperative Professor Oak, followed by the sea voyage to Slateport City. It had also been a crucible for their new reality. Something had shifted, subtly but irrevocably, in the sea cave near Cerulean. May watched Ash and Misty from her seat near the railing, a thoughtful frown on her face. It wasn't overt. They didn't hold hands or steal kisses. It was in the way he would look at her when she wasn't paying attention, a look of profound respect that bordered on reverence. It was in the way she would walk a little closer to him, a silent offering of support. The charged, awkward tension that had existed between all of them had coalesced, finding a focal point between the two. A circuit had been completed. May felt a pang of something she couldn't quite name. It wasn't simple jealousy. It was more complex, like the feeling of being the last one to understand a joke. Dawn felt it too. She sat beside May, sketching idly in a notebook, but her gaze kept flicking towards the other pair, her brow furrowed. They were happy for Misty, truly. But they also felt adjacent. Accessories to a destiny that was still coming into focus. "He called her my shield," Dawn said quietly, not looking up from her drawing. It fit. She stood between her Gyarados and its pain, and the whole place healed. She paused. "I wonder what we are." The question hung in the air between them. Lady Mela, the voice. Lady Dia, the vision. They were just words, titles from a life she couldn't remember. May looked down at her own hands. She was a coordinator. She brought out the inner beauty of her Pokémon through grace and style. How was that supposed to save the world from a shadow god? Ash must have sensed their unease. He left Misty's side and walked over, leaning on the railing beside them. "Almost there," he said, his voice carrying easily over the wind. The prince was there, in his confident posture, but the warm, friendly smile was all Ash. "Lucario has a location. An old place of power. He calls it the Land Forge. It is a place where the life force of the continent is most potent," Lucario's voice projected into their minds. He stood near the Farah's bow, a silent statue. A nexus of geothermal and terrestrial aura, hidden in the foothills of Mount Chimney. The hand will be drawn to it like a moth to a poisoned flame. "So, what's the plan?" May asked, grateful for the change in subject. "Another purification ceremony?"
"Something like that," Ash said. "But every sanctum is different. The cradle of the tides needed to be soothed. The land forge will need to be listened to. Its voice has likely been silenced. He turned his gaze on May, and for the first time, she felt the full weight of his focus, the same intensity he'd shown Misty. That was always your gift, Myella.
May's heart skipped a beat. He said the name so naturally, a simple fact. It made her feel a spike of both anxiety and anticipation. This was her turn, her trial. The forest at the base of Mount Chimney was suffocating. The air was thick with the smell of scorched earth and sawdust, and a hazy, chemical smog hung in the canopy, choking the life from the leaves. Massive, ugly machines, painted a dull, militaristic gray, sat silent and abandoned amidst a wasteland of their own making. A vast swath of ancient forest had been clear-cut, the earth torn open in a deep, bleeding trench that snaked its way up the mountainside. They weren't just searching, Dawn observed, her voice tight with anger as she knelt and touched the scarred earth. They were excavating. They followed that energy line like a roadmap. "They're after Groudon's energy," Ash said, his eyes hard as flint as he surveyed the devastation. "Not to awaken it. To siphon it. To twist the very power of the land into a weapon for the Umbra." They followed the trench, the sense of violation growing with every step. This wasn't just environmental damage, it was a desecration. May felt it most keenly. A dull ache started behind her eyes, a sorrow that wasn't entirely her own. She felt the silent scream of the uprooted trees, the pain of the displaced Pokémon, the groaning protest of the mountain itself. She placed a hand on the trunk of a surviving, half-scorched ironwood, and a wave of dizziness washed over her. She saw a flash. A vision of a vibrant green forest, of Pokémon living in harmony, of a soft, golden light pulsing deep within the earth. A memory of how it was supposed to be. "May, are you all right?" Misty asked, steadying her. I can feel it," May whispered, shaking her head to clear it. "The forest. It's in agony." Before she could explain further, a voice, cold and sharp with contempt, cut through the smog-filled air. "The land feels nothing, girl. It is merely a resource to be exploited." Valerius stepped out from behind one of the hulking machines. He wasn't alone. His Metagross floated silently beside him, its metallic body gleaming. But this time, he was flanked by two other Pokémon, a cunning, formidable Gengar and a heavily armored Aggron. He looked different. The terror he'd shown in the Tree of Beginning was gone, replaced by a cold, renewed conviction. His violet eyes burned with the fire of a zealot.
"I admit, Prince, you surprised me," Valerius said, his lips twisting into a sneer as he addressed Ash. "Your power is genuine, but it is wasted on sentimentality. You fled a war once. Now you cry over a few felled trees. The war was lost because of the shadow you now serve," Ash countered, stepping forward, his friends fanning out behind him. "You're a fool, Valerius, a puppet for a power you don't understand." Valerius laughed. "A puppet? My family has guarded the truth for 1,000 years. A truth you buried. My ancestor, Lord Valen, was an Aura Guardian of your court. He stood and fought while you, his prince, had yourself sealed away in cowardly slumber. He saw you abandon your people, abandon Ethelgard to its fate. My lineage is one of honor. Yours is one of shame." The accusation struck Ash with visible force. He remembered Valen. A good man. A proud man. He had ordered him to lead the civilian evacuation. He must have seen Ash's sealing as a retreat, not a sacrifice. The lie had festered for generations, twisting a family's honor into a legacy of hatred. "Your ancestor was a hero," Ash said, his voice quiet but firm. "But he did not know the full truth. The choice was made to save the world, not to abandon it. The Umbra is twisting your family's pride, Valerius. It's using you." "Lies," Valerius roared, his composure finally breaking. "You will not poison his memory with your excuses. I challenge you, Oslan of Ethelgard. A formal or a duel. Your guardians against my strength. Let us see which legacy endures." "I accept," Ash said without hesitation. "No." The single word, spoken with a soft but unyielding certainty, came from May. She stepped forward, moving past Ash to stand between the two rivals. Her expression was no longer uncertain or afraid. It was filled with a calm, righteous anger. She looked at Valerius, not as a foe to be defeated, but as a man inflicting a deep and personal wound. "Your fight is with him," she said, her voice ringing with a newfound authority. "But your crime is against this forest. Valerius looked at her with dismissive arrogance. You think a coordinator can challenge me? May didn't answer with words. She closed her eyes. She reached down, not with her hands, but with her soul, seeking the thrumming pain of the earth she'd felt earlier. She found it, a deep, resonant hum of grief. And instead of recoiling from it, she embraced it. She let the sorrow of the land flow into her. A stunning aura, the color of new spring leaves and veins of pure gold, erupted around her. It wasn't explosive like ashes or fluid like Misty's. It was grounding, solid, as powerful and unshakable as the mountain behind them. The very air around her seemed to sweeten, the chemical smog receding from her presence. Blaziken, let's go, she cried, throwing her Pokeball. Her ace Pokemon appeared in a burst of flame, but the fire seemed to burn brighter, hotter, its edges tinged with a golden energy drawn from the ground itself. Venusaur, I need your help, too. The great floral Pokemon materialized, its flower glowing with an impossible vitality. Valerius's sneer faltered, replaced by a flicker of disbelief. He recognized the energy. It was the aura of a true guardian. So, another one awakens, he hissed. It doesn't matter. Metagross, Aggron, destroy them. Psychic, heavy slam. Blaziken, flare blitz. Venusaur, petal dance. May commanded. Blaziken shot forward, wreathed in golden flames. Metagross met him with a psychic barrier, but this time, the flames didn't just dissipate. They clung to the barrier, superheated by the geothermal energy May was unconsciously channeling, causing the psychic shield to crack and shatter. Blaziken's blazing kick slammed into Metagross's chassis, sending the steel behemoth staggering back. Aggron charged, a mountain of living iron, but Venusaur stomped its feet. Thick, thorny vines, energized by May's aura, erupted from the torn-up earth. They weren't normal vines. They were as hard as steel, and they wrapped around Aggron's legs, halting its charge completely. The petal dance that followed was not a graceful swirl of pink, but a razor-sharp storm of golden-green energy that hammered against the armored Pokemon's hide. Ash, Misty, and Dawn watched in stunned silence. May wasn't just commanding her Pokemon. She was harmonizing with them, with the very ground they stood on. She was borrowing the strength of the wounded mountain, turning its pain into power. Your Pokemon are strong, Valerius snarled, unnerved by the turn of events. But you are still just a girl. He ordered his Gengar to use Shadow Ball, aiming it directly at May. May didn't even flinch. Blaziken, intercept. But before Blaziken could move, the ground at May's feet swelled upwards, forming a solid shield of earth and root that absorbed the Shadow Ball completely. The land itself was protecting her. She had become its voice. And it had become her shield. It's not about strength, Valerius, May said, her voice resonating with the quiet power of the earth. It's about connection. Something you've lost. You talk of honor, but you serve a power that only consumes. It's feeding on your anger, on your family's pain, and you're letting it. Silence. He yelled, but there was a tremor of doubt in his voice. I won't be silent, May replied, her eyes glowing with her golden green aura. And neither will the land. She reached out her hand, not to attack, but to offer. Let me show you. She focused her aura, not into a weapon, but into a bridge. A wave of pure, empathetic energy washed over Valerius. It wasn't an attack. It was a vision, a feeling, forced upon him. He cried out, stumbling back, his hands flying to his head. He was no longer in the forest. He was adrift in a cold, starless void. He felt a presence with him, the Umbra. He felt its nature not as an ally, but as a parasite. He felt its immense, gnawing hunger. And he felt it feeding on him. He felt it drink his pride, his grief, his rage, metabolizing his family's honor into fuel, leaving only an empty, cold ambition behind. He saw his ancestor, Valen, not as a proud hero, but as a weeping spirit, lamenting the corruption of his noble line. The truth his family had guarded was the Umbra's most elaborate lie. The vision ended. Valerius collapsed to his knees, gasping, his face pale with horror. The cold conviction in his eyes was shattered, replaced by a profound, terrifying confusion. He stared at May, then at Ash, as if seeing them for the first time. He recalled his battered Pokemon without a word, turned, and fled into the smoggy woods, his retreat not one of tactical necessity, but but of a man whose entire world had just been proven false. May's aura faded, and she swayed, the immense effort catching up to her. Ash was there in an instant, catching her arm and steadying her. He looked down at her, his expression a mixture of pride, relief, and the same awe he had shown Misty. You always knew how to heal, Myella, he said, his voice soft with an ancient affection. Even me. He lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle, princely kiss to her knuckles. It wasn't a gesture of romance in the same fiery way as his moment with Misty had been. It was a gesture of deep, profound gratitude and respect. A king acknowledging the unique and irreplaceable power of his court's voice. May felt her cheeks flush, but she didn't pull her hand away. As Ash helped her stand, she looked over his shoulder and met Misty's gaze. There was no rivalry in the cerulean gym leader's eyes, no hint of jealousy. Only a shared, dawning understanding. Misty gave her a small, genuine smile and a nod. They were not in competition. They were pillars of the same temple, and another of their number had just remembered her strength. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. The Vision of the Nexus. Sinnoh was a land of myth and memory, a place where the bones of the world felt closer to the surface. The flight to Harem City had been quiet, contemplative. A new equilibrium was forming within their group. May and Misty now shared a silent language, an understanding that came from having faced their past selves and emerged whole. They would often lapse into practicing their newfound abilities, Misty manipulating the condensation on a water bottle into complex, dancing shapes, and May coaxing a potted plant on the plain to bloom out of season. It was beautiful, miraculous, and for Dawn, it was a constant, gnawing reminder of her own apparent lack of purpose. She felt like a spare part. Ash had called Misty his shield, and she had proven it. He had called May the voice, and she had silenced a zealot with the truth of the land. But what was she? The vision. All she saw was the same reality as everyone else. The only thing unique to her lately was the splitting headaches that had started after leaving Hoenn. At first, they were minor, a dull throb behind the eyes. But now, they came with strange side effects. A flash of déjà vu so strong it made her dizzy. A snippet of a conversation heard a split second before it was spoken. A fleeting image of a door swinging open just before someone entered the room. It was disorienting, and she hid it, blaming it on fatigue. But she saw the way Ash watched her sometimes, his ancient eyes filled with a knowing concern that made her feel even more isolated. He knew what was happening to her, and he was waiting. The pressure of that unspoken expectation was suffocating. Their destination was the region's crown jewel of myth, Spear Pillar, atop the colossal peak of Mt. Coronet. The climb was arduous, a pilgrimage into the thinning air and the crushing weight of history. This place is different, Lucario's voice projected as they navigated the final, treacherous ascent into the snow-dusted ruins. The other sanctums were like reservoirs of worldly aura. This is a wound. A place where the veil between worlds has always been thin. It is a nexus. A wound? Dawn asked, pulling her white coat tighter around herself as a bitter wind whipped through the crumbling stone columns. The headache was back, a sharp, insistent spike. A place of immense power, but also immense vulnerability, Ash explained, his gaze sweeping across the ancient, ruined temple. The air here felt wrong, stretched thin and brittle, vibrating with a high-frequency hum just at the edge of hearing. In my time, we used it to observe the celestial patterns, to listen to the whispers between dimensions. But if corrupted, he didn't need to finish. They could see it. The center of Spear Pillar was dominated by a raised dais, but the air above it was distorted, shimmering like a heat haze on a frozen day. The space wasn't just empty, it felt negative. A vortex of shadow was coalescing there, pulling in the light, twisting the very geometry of the ruins around it. And standing before it, overseeing a dozen Umbra agents performing a synchronized ritual, was a woman. She was tall and regal, dressed not in the grunts, utilitarian gray, but in a long, form-fitting coat of the deepest black, embroidered with silver patterns that seemed to writhe like captured starlight. Her hair was stark white, braided into an intricate coronet, and her face was a mask of cold, imperious beauty. She radiated an aura of shadow so dense and powerful it was a tangible force, a suffocating pressure that dwarfed anything they had felt from Valerius. This was the matriarch. So the broken prince and his reincarnated pets have arrived, she said, her voice like the chime of cracked crystal. She didn't turn to face them, her attention fixed on the growing anomaly. You are too late. The conduits are open. The poison you failed to contain in Kanto and Hoenn now flows here, to the weakest point. Here, we will do more than simply listen to the whispers. We will carve a doorway. The air crackled. The dimensional shimmer above the dais intensified, and with a sound like tearing fabric, a rift opened. It was a gash in reality, a window into a void of absolute, starless black. From it, a glistening tendril of living shadow, a shard of the Umbra, slithered forth. It was formless yet cohesive, and its mere presence broadcast a wave of primal fear that sank into their bones. The effect on Dawn was instantaneous and catastrophic. The dull headache exploded into an agony of sensory overload. The Nexus, combined with the Umbra's direct influence, ripped the last of the seals from her mind. She screamed, stumbling back and clutching her head as a tidal wave of visions crashed over her. A burning castle, Myrella's dying breath, a kiss from a boy in a red hat she'd never met, a white-haired woman weeping over a fallen king. Ash, a moment from now, shouting, Pikachu, Thunderbolt. Valerius, miles away, staring at his reflection in a river, his face a mask of conflict. A future where May's Blaziken was consumed by shadow, a future where Misty's Gyarados was turned against them again, a future where she stood alone on this peak, the world silent and gray. Past, present, and 1,000 possible futures assaulted her all at once. It was a cacophony of realities, a storm of information she couldn't process. She was a liability. She couldn't fight. She couldn't even think. Dawn. May cried, rushing to her side, but the battle had already begun. Hold the line. Don't let that thing spread. Ash commanded, his voice a clarion call in the chaos. He, Misty, and May moved to intercept the Umbra Shard. The fight was a nightmare. The shard didn't attack physically, it attacked their Pokemon's very essence. It lashed out, and when it touched May's Venusaur, the brilliant flower on its back withered instantly, its life force leached away. It brushed against Misty's Starmie, and the Pokemon's psychic energy turned inward, causing it to attack itself in confusion. These were not Pokemon battles, they were desperate acts of spiritual defense. The matriarch watched, a faint, cruel smile on her lips. She raised a hand, and a sphere of pure shadow coalesced, which she launched at Ash. He met it with a blast of his own aura, the blue and black energies exploding in a shower of neutralized light. Your power is a pale echo of what it was, Aslan, she taunted, gliding forward. 1,000 years of sleep has made you weak. And your choice of guardians this time is sentimental. She looked at Misty and May, who were fighting a desperate battle to contain the shard. I remember when you valued strength. Power. Her eyes narrowed, and a flicker of something ancient and personal, a deep, burning resentment, flashed within them. He was mine before he was yours. The words, cryptic and venomous, struck a chord of forgotten memory in Ash, but he had no time to decipher it. The matriarch was on him, moving with impossible speed. She didn't use a Pokemon. She was the weapon. Blades of solidified shadow formed on her hands, and she engaged him in a furious melee, her attacks forcing him purely on the defensive. He and Lucario fought back to back, a dance of aura and steel against a storm of darkness. They were skilled, powerful, a prince and his knight. But they were outmatched. The matriarch fainted, her shadow blade forcing Lucario to block high. With her other hand, she unleashed a wave of dark energy that slammed into Ash's chest, sending him staggering back, his breath stolen. He landed hard against a pillar, coughing, his aura flickering. Predictable, she hissed, standing over him. Always protecting others before yourself. She raised her hand, a long, wicked lance of pure, concentrated shadow energy forming above her palm. It radiated a cold that was not the absence of heat, but the absence of life itself. This is the end, my lost prince. The world you failed will be reborn in true, silent order. Dawn saw it. Amidst the swirling vortex of agony in her mind, this one moment became terrifyingly clear. She saw the lance strike. She saw Ash's body go limp. She saw the light fade from his eyes. She saw Misty's scream, May's collapse in despair. She saw the Umbra pour from the rift and swallow the sky. She saw a dozen variations of it. In one, he dodged, but the lance hit the pillar behind him, and the entire ruin collapsed, crushing them all. In another, Pikachu took the hit for him, its small body disintegrating into nothing. In another, Misty threw up a shield of water, but the shadow lance passed through it as if it wasn't there, the negative energy impervious to physical barriers. Every future led to ruin. Every path ended in darkness. All but one. A single, razor-thin thread of possibility. A 1 in a million chance that required impossible timing, impossible precision, impossible faith. The pain in her head vanished, replaced by a singular, diamond-sharp focus. She stopped fighting the visions. She stopped trying to make sense of them. She let them flow through her, and she became the navigator in the heart of the temporal storm. Her dormant aura, the power of the Nexus, the ability not just to see but to perceive the architecture of reality, exploded from her. It wasn't blue, or green, or gold. It was a brilliant, blinding, crystalline white light, pure and multifaceted as a perfect diamond. Her eyes snapped open, glowing with the same light. She was no longer a confused girl. She was the vision. The matriarch thrust her hand forward to launch the fatal blow. Now! Dawn screamed. The command was absolute, imbued with the certainty of a seer who had already witnessed the outcome. It wasn't aimed at Ash, or May, or Misty. It was aimed at the universe itself. As she screamed, she and her Togekiss, who had been hovering protectively by her side, moved as one. They unleashed their combined aura. But they didn't create a shield. They didn't fire a counterattack. They did something far more profound. For a single, impossible instant, they bent space. The air in front of Ash warped, folding in on itself to create a small, shimmering hole, a perfect, circular portal no bigger than a dinner plate. The matriarch's shadow lance, already in motion, flew directly into it and vanished. A second later, an identical portal opened directly behind the matriarch's own back. The lance erupted from it, striking her between the shoulder blades with the full force of her own attack. She let out a strangled cry of shock and pain, the shadow energy consuming itself. The concentrated darkness washed over her, and she staggered, her perfect composure shattered. The rift to the umbra wavered, and the shard of shadow shrieked before being pulled back through the tear as it snapped shut. The matriarch clutched her shoulder, her white coat stained with flickering shadow. She looked at her own hand, then at the four of them, her cold fury now mixed with disbelief. Her gaze fell on Dawn, who stood bathed in a fading white light, her chest heaving. The seer, she whispered, the name a curse on her lips. Impossible. She gave Ash one last look, a promise of future agony. This changes nothing. And with that, she and her surviving agents dissolved into the shadows, vanishing as if they were never there. The adrenaline faded. The crystalline aura receded. Dawn's strength gave out, and she collapsed, the sensory whiplash hitting her full force. Ash, pushing himself to his feet, was there before she hit the ground, catching her in his arms. She was trembling violently, her eyes wide with a terror that went beyond the battle. Ash, she choked out, clinging to him. I saw it. I saw the real Umbra. Through the rift. It's so empty. There's nothing. No love, no life, no light. Just hunger. He held her tightly, pulling her close and wrapping his own aura around her like a protective cloak, shielding her from the chaotic energies of the Nexus, giving her a single, stable point to anchor herself in reality. It's gone, he murmured into her hair. You saved us, Dia. He used her ancient name, and it felt like coming home. She looked up at him, her fear-filled eyes meeting his. He saw her terror, her sacrifice, the immense burden she had just accepted. It cannot have you, he said, his voice thick with the memory of a promise he'd failed to keep a lifetime ago. It cannot have any of you. I will not lose you again. He leaned down and pressed a soft, firm kiss to her forehead. It wasn't a kiss of passion, nor one of mere gratitude. It was a seal, a vow of protection, a final, definitive act of inclusion. Misty and May came to their side, placing their hands on Dawn's shoulders. The circle was complete. The shield, the voice, the vision, all awakened. They stood together on the windswept peak of Spear Pillar, battered and exhausted, but for the first time since their awakening, they were whole. A single unit, a four-souled constellation, ready to face the endless, hungry dark. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. The Gathering of Kings. The world was holding its breath. The seismic event at Spear Pillar had not gone unnoticed. Satellites had registered a massive, unexplainable energy spike, followed by a distortion in localized space-time that had made physicists across the globe either tear their hair out or whisper about the divine. Official reports were vague, blaming freak atmospheric conditions and magnetic interference. But people knew. They felt it. A tremor in the collective unconscious, a fleeting glimpse of a crack in the sky. The champions of the major leagues, the closest the modern world had to a unified ruling council, were not fooled by meteorological explanations. They saw the reports from the Cameron Range, the ecological disaster at Mt. Chimney, and now the temporal anomaly at Spear Pillar. They saw the pattern. A coordinated, escalating series of attacks on sites of mythological significance. This was not random terrorism. This was a campaign. An emergency summit was called. The location. The Indigo Plateau, the historic heart of the Pokemon League, a fortress of tradition and power. All champions, Lance of Kanto and Johto, Stephen Stone of Hoenn, Cynthia of Sinnoh, and Diantha of Kalos, were to be in attendance. It was an unprecedented gathering, a signal to the world that the threat was real, even if it remained unnamed. In a quiet hotel room in Canalave City, Ash watched the news report on a small television, his face illuminated by the flickering screen. Lance's stern expression filled the frame as he gave a brief, tight-lipped statement about global security. "They're mobilizing," Ash said, his voice quiet. "But they're blind. They're preparing for a war against an enemy they can't see, using weapons that will be useless." Misty, May, and Dawn were with him, the mood in the room a stark contrast to the triumphant unity they'd found at Spear Pillar. The weight of the world had settled upon them. Dawn, now free of her debilitating headaches, was processing the constant, low-level hum of probabilistic futures that now filled her mind. May felt a deep, abiding ache for the wounded planet. Misty felt the oceans, restless and fearful. "So what do we do?" Misty asked, ever the pragmatist. "Send them an anonymous tip. Dear champions, a 1,000-year-old prince and his 3 reincarnated girlfriends would like to report a shadow god is trying to eat the universe. P.S. Please believe us." The sarcasm was a defense mechanism, but the question was genuine. They were 4 young people, albeit 4 incredibly powerful young people, against a global conspiracy backed by a cosmic entity. They couldn't fight this war on their own. Ash turned from the television, his eyes clear and decisive. The internal conflict that had plagued him was gone, forged in the fires of their shared trials into a seamless whole. He was Ash, and he was Aslan. He possessed the prince's strategic mind and the trainer's unwavering heart. "No," he said. "We don't send a tip. We deliver a message. In person." May's eyes widened. "You want to go to the Indigo Plateau? To the summit? They won't just let us walk in," Dawn added, a flicker of a vision. A line of stern-faced security guards, flashing in her mind's eye. "They will if they know we're coming," Ash countered. He looked at Lucario, who stood impassively by the window. "Is your telepathy strong enough to reach that far? To reach Lance?" "It is a strain, but it is possible," Lucario replied. "He is a dragon master. His mind is strong, attuned to powerful psychic energies." "Then send him a message," Ash commanded. "Tell him the one who understands the true nature of the threat will present himself at the Indigo Plateau tomorrow at noon. Tell him to grant us entry. He will be suspicious, but his curiosity will outweigh his caution. He won't be able to resist." It was a gamble, a bold, arrogant move. It was pure Aslan. But it was delivered with Ash's confident, infectious grin. The girls looked at each other, and a shared spark of excitement, of thrilling danger, passed between them. This was it. The next stage. They were no longer just reacting. They were taking control. The Indigo Plateau was a citadel. Perched atop a mountain and accessible by only a single, heavily guarded road, it projected an aura of unbreachable authority. When their rented car reached the first checkpoint, they were met by a wall of armed guards and a very nervous League official holding a tablet. "Ash Ketchum?" the official asked, his voice squeaking slightly. "That's me," Ash said, leaning out the window. The man swallowed hard. "Champion Lance has granted you provisional access. You are to proceed directly to the main stadium's central chamber. Do not deviate." As they drove through the hallowed grounds, Past training fields where Elite Four members were overseeing drills, the sheer scale of the League's power was on full display. This was the heart of the world's organized strength. And they were about to walk into its throne room and tell them everything they knew was wrong. The central chamber was a grand, intimidating hall. A massive, circular table dominated the room, and seated at it were the four most powerful trainers in the world. Lance, his cape a slash of crimson, looked every bit the imperious dragon master, his arms crossed, his expression a thundercloud. Stephen Stone, elegant and analytical, studied them with the cool, appraising eye of a geologist examining a rare but potentially fraudulent gem. Diantha, the famous actress and champion of Kalos, regarded them with a polite, practiced smile that didn't quite reach her sharp, intelligent eyes. And Cynthia, the champion of Sinnoh, leaned forward slightly, her expression unreadable but intensely focused, her gaze lingering on Ash with a flicker of scholarly curiosity. Mr. Ketchum, Lance began, his voice a low rumble that tolerated no nonsense. You sent a rather dramatic message. You claimed to understand the threat we face. The floor is yours. I suggest you do not waste our time. Ash walked forward, his friends flanking him, a silent, unified front. He stopped before the table, meeting Lance's glare without flinching. My name is Ash Ketchum, he began, his voice calm and steady, filling the vast chamber. But that is only half the truth. I am also the reincarnation of Prince Oslan of Ethelgard, a kingdom that fell 1,000 years ago in a war against an entity of pure shadow known as the Umbra. A stunned silence fell over the room. Stephen raised a skeptical eyebrow. Diantha's polite smile faltered. Lance's expression darkened from stern to outright furious. Is this a joke? Lance snapped. Reincarnation. Ancient kingdoms. You look no older than 20. 19. Actually, Ash corrected him calmly. And I understand your skepticism. But the energy signatures you've been tracking, the coordinated attacks, this is the work of the Umbra's followers, the Hand of Umbra. They are weakening the world's defenses to allow their master to cross over into our dimension and consume it, just as it tried to do a millennium ago. He gestured to his friends. These are Misty, May, and Dawn. They are also the reincarnated souls of my royal guardians, Lady Myrella, the shield, Lady Myella, the voice, and Lady Dia, the vision. Our memories and abilities were reawakened by the Hand's activities at the Tree of Beginning. Stephen Stone finally spoke, his voice smooth and laced with incredulity. Mr. Ketchum, your career as a trainer is well documented and impressive. But what you are proposing is the stuff of fairy tales. You have no proof. He's right, Ash, Diantha added, her tone gentle but firm. We are facing a tangible, real-world threat. We need facts and evidence, not mythology. Only Cynthia remained silent, her gray eyes narrowed, studying not Ash, but the four of them as a group. She saw the way they stood, the unconscious, perfect spacing between them. She saw the way Lucario stood behind Ash, a posture not of a Pokemon, but of a sworn knight. She, more than any other, was a student of the myths he was describing. Words are meaningless, Ash said, his gaze sweeping across the table, acknowledging their points. Proof is not something I can give you in a file or a testimony. It must be demonstrated. He straightened, the full weight of Aslan's regal authority settling upon him. I challenge you. The statement dropped into the room like a bomb. Lance actually recoiled. You challenge us. All four of you, Ash clarified. Here. Now. A battle. But not a standard match. A war game. My team, myself, Misty, May, Dawn, Pikachu, and my Lucario, against the four of you and your chosen partners. 6 against 4. Full use of all our abilities. No restrictions. Let our actions serve as the only proof you need. It was an act of supreme, almost insane arrogance. To challenge 4 champions simultaneously was unthinkable. But the way he said it, not as a boast, but as a simple, logical proposal, gave them pause. Lance was about to refuse outright, to have them thrown out for their insolence, but Cynthia spoke first, her voice cutting through the tension. I accept. All eyes turned to her. She was looking at Ash, her expression one of intense, scholarly fascination. I have studied the legends of Aura and the ancient Sinnoh myths my entire life, she said. I have always believed them to be more than just stories. What you describe, it aligns with texts I once thought were purely allegorical. A demonstration, as you call it, would be illuminating. She stood up. I will participate. Stephen Stone sighed, a faint, amused smile playing on his lips. If Cynthia is in, then so am I. I confess, my curiosity is piqued. The energy readings from MT Chimney were unlike anything I've ever seen. Perhaps there's a correlation. Diantha looked from Ash's determined face to her fellow champions. It would certainly be the performance of a lifetime, she mused, a theatrical sparkle in her eye. Very well, I accept. All eyes fell on Lance. He was still fuming, but he was outvoted. And more than that, a challenge had been issued on his own ground. To refuse would be an admission of something. Fear. Disbelief. He wasn't sure. But his pride as the league's strongest master would not allow him to back down. Fine, he growled. But when this farce is over, you will have some serious questions to answer. He stood, his cape sweeping behind him. To the battlefield. The main stadium of the Indigo Plateau was a colossal arena, a theater of legends where countless championship battles had been decided. But today, it was empty, the stands silent, the only audience the handful of Elite Four members who had been permitted to watch from a secure skybox. Ash and his team stood on one side of the field. Across from them, the four champions took their positions, their presence a palpable wave of power. Lance with his Dragonite, Stephen with his formidable Metagross, Cynthia with her iconic Garchomp, Diantha with her elegant Gardevoir. It was a lineup of gods, a team that could conquer a small country. This is crazy, Misty whispered, her heart hammering. Completely, certifiably insane. I saw a path to victory, Dawn whispered back, her eyes flickering as she scanned a dozen possible futures. It's thin. Very thin. Then we just have to be perfect, Ash said, a confident smile on his face. He looked at each of them, his eyes glowing faintly with his own blue aura. Listen to Dawn. Follow my lead. Let your instincts guide you. Don't be trainers. Be what you were born to be. Ready. They nodded in unison, their own auras flaring to life in response to his, Misty's cerulean blue, May's golden green, Dawn's crystalline white. The combined glow was breathtaking. In the skybox, the Elite Four members gasped. On the other side, the champions were stunned. They had felt aura before, from Riley or other special trainers. But this was different. This was four distinct energies, harmonizing, weaving together into a single, unified field of power. The battle begins. Lance roared, deciding to end this quickly. Dragonite, Dragon Rush. The dragon shot forward like an orange missile. Dawn. Ash yelled. Right flank. Gardevoir is charging a Moonblast. Metagross is preparing a Psychic Terrain. Dawn's voice was sharp, clear, a cascade of information delivered in a single breath. Misty, shield the right. Ash commanded. May, disrupt the terrain. Lucario, Pikachu, with me. We intercept Dragonite. It all happened in a split second. As Dragonite charged, a blindingly powerful Moonblast erupted from Gardevoir. But Misty was already moving. She thrust her hand forward, and a massive, high-pressure wall of water, pulled from the arena's decorative pools, erupted from the ground, absorbing the fairy-type attack in a cloud of hissing steam. Simultaneously, as Metagross's eyes glowed, preparing to flood the field with its psychic power, May stomped her foot. Her green and gold aura sank into the earth. The neat turf of the battlefield buckled and shifted. Jagged rocks and thick, gnarled roots burst from the ground in a chaotic, uneven mess, completely shattering the psychic field before it could form and turning the terrain into a treacherous obstacle course. Stephen's Metagross, built for stability, faltered. Freed from the other threats, Ash, Lucario, and Pikachu met Dragonite head-on. Aura Sphere and Thunderbolt, combined. Ash ordered. Lucario's blue sphere of energy and Pikachu's crackling lightning bolt twisted together, forming a spiraling projectile of immense power that slammed into Dragonite, halting its charge in a massive explosion. The champions were floored. The speed, the coordination, the synergy, it was impossible. They weren't fighting four trainers and two Pokémon. They were fighting a single, six-limbed organism that moved and thought as one. Garchomp, Dragon Claw, Cynthia commanded, recovering first. Her land shark Pokémon shot forward, weaving through the broken terrain May had created. Incoming, 5 o'clock low. Dawn warned. May, bind it, Ash yelled. May slammed her palms on the ground. The earth around Garchomp softened, turning into a thick, grasping mud that caught at its feet, slowing its charge for a critical half-second. It was enough. Lucario was there to meet it, parrying the dragon claw with a bone-jarring metal claw of its own. The battle raged. The champions were immensely powerful, their Pokémon legends in their own right. But they were playing checkers against an opponent playing chess in 3 dimensions. Every attack they launched was anticipated. Every strategy they employed was dismantled before it could be executed. Dawn's visions gave them a constant, precognitive edge, while Misty's shields and May's terrain control systematically nullified the champion's advantages. Ash, Lucario, and Pikachu were free to act as a relentless spearhead, their attacks perfectly timed and brutally efficient. They never landed a decisive blow on any of the champion's Pokémon. But they didn't need to. They fought them to a complete and utter standstill. After 10 minutes of a furious, perfectly synchronized ballet of power and precognition, all 10 Pokémon stood exhausted on the ruined battlefield. Dragonite was bruised, Metagross was mired in mud, Garchomp was panting, and Gardevoir's energy was spent. On the other side, Pikachu, Lucario, and the girls were equally drained. It was a perfect stalemate. A draw. A heavy silence descended on the stadium. Lance stared, his mouth slightly agape, the fury on his face replaced by sheer, unadulterated disbelief. It was Cynthia who walked forward first, recalling her Garchomp. She looked at the 4 young people, at the way their auras still pulsed in a faint, synchronized rhythm. She looked at Ash, who stood at the center of it all, the calm, unwavering anchor. The aura, she said, her voice filled with a profound, scholarly awe. It flows between you as one. It doesn't just harmonize, it communicates. I've read about this in the oldest texts. A bond-forged battle union. A phenomenon so rare it was considered a myth even among the aura guardians of old. She looked directly at Ash, her skepticism gone, replaced by a deep, undeniable belief. It's beautiful. I believe you. Stephen recalled his Metagross, a slow, thoughtful smile spreading across his face. To control a battlefield's terrain with such precision, that is no simple Pokémon move. My father would have called it impossible. I am forced to conclude I was wrong. Diantha simply nodded, her eyes wide. That was no performance. That was real. Finally, Lance looked at his tired Dragonite, then back at the unwavering team of 6. He, the great Dragon Master, the bastion of the League's power, had been fought to a standstill by a 19-year-old boy and his friends. The proof was undeniable. He took a deep, steadying breath. My apologies, Prince Aslan, he said, the name feeling strange and yet right on his tongue. It seems the Pokémon League has much to learn. The champions, the strongest trainers in the world, pledged their allegiance. The leagues would mobilize under Ash's guidance. Far away, in a chamber of living shadow, the matriarch watched the proceedings on a shimmering, scrying surface. Her wound, a festering patch of darkness on her back, still pulsed with pain. A low, guttural whisper, the voice of the true Umbra, echoed in the chamber, full of displeasure. The old world rallies to him, she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper. The champions, the leagues, they are insects, throwing themselves at a rising tide. It does not matter. Let them gather their pathetic armies. Let them believe they have found a champion. She turned her gaze to a kneeling figure in the shadows of her chamber. It was Valerius, his face pale and drawn, his eyes hollowed out by the crisis of faith May had inflicted upon him. He was a broken tool, but one she could still use. Your crisis of faith is over, Valerius, she said, her voice leaving no room for argument. Your hatred for the prince is the only truth you have left. Cling to it. She pointed a single, sharp finger at him. Go. Bring me the tree. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. The Shadow of Ethelgerd. The alliance with the champions was not a magic wand. It was a key. It opened doors to resources Ash could have only dreamed of, but the path forward remained shrouded in the fog of 1,000 lost years. They now had armies willing to mobilize and the world's greatest strategic minds at their disposal, but they were preparing for a war against a ghost, a shadow with no known capital or leader. They gathered in the war room of the Indigo Plateau, a high-tech chamber of holographic maps and data screens that felt jarringly modern to Aslan's soul. Lance paced, his dragonite a constant, intimidating presence behind him. Stephen analyzed geological surveys, searching for patterns in the Umbra's attacks. Diantha coordinated intelligence networks across the regions. But it was Cynthia who provided the breakthrough. She stood before a holographic star chart, her expression one of intense concentration. Your kingdom, Ethelgerd, she said, her gaze fixed on Ash. You said it fell. But the legends of studied, the most obscure ones, never speak of its destruction. They say it vanished. That it was unstitched from the world to keep its secrets safe. A pocket dimension, Ash breathed, the words surfacing from a deep well of memory. A final gambit. Our mages, with their last ounce of strength, shielded the capital from the Umbra's final wave. They pushed it into a fold of reality, to preserve our knowledge, our history. Exactly, Cynthia affirmed, her eyes alight with scholarly fire. And if that's true, it would emit a unique, residual energy signature. Not aura, not psychic power, but something spatial. Something constant but incredibly faint, like a radio signal from a distant star. For centuries, our instruments would have dismissed it as background noise. She tapped a command into the console. The star chart dissolved, replaced by a complex energy grid of the known world. But now, knowing what to look for, she isolated a specific frequency. The grid went dark, save for one single, infinitesimally small point of light, blinking steadily. It was located in the heart of a vast, uncharted mountain range in a remote corner of the world, a place known on maps only as the Silent Peaks. There, she whispered. That's your ghost. The journey itself was a disorienting experience. A state-of-the-art League aircraft took them to the edge of the Silent Peaks, but technology could take them no further. The rest of the way had to be made on foot, into a region where compasses spun uselessly and the air felt strangely thin, as if they were walking on the skin of the world. Cynthia, unwilling to miss the historical discovery of a lifetime, had insisted on accompanying them. The dimensional fabric is unstable here, she explained, checking a device on her wrist that was spitting out nonsensical readings. It's like the border between our reality and somewhere else is frayed. Ash needed no device. He could feel it. A homesickness so profound it was a physical ache in his chest. He led the way, not by sight, but by a pull in his soul, a homing instinct 1,000 years old. He led them to a dead end, a sheer cliff face of seamless granite that towered into the clouds. This is it, he said, his voice thick with emotion. A rock wall? Misty asked, looking around. Are you sure? Ash didn't answer. He stepped forward and placed his palm flat against the cold stone. He closed his eyes, not searching for a mechanism or a hidden switch, but for a memory. The feeling of his father's hand on his, showing him the secret. He let his aura flow, not as a blast of power, but as a specific, resonant frequency, a key made of life itself. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a low hum vibrated from the rock. Intricate silver lines, like a circuit board designed by elves, flared to life across the cliff face. The granite shimmered, became translucent, and then dissolved into an archway of pure, white light. Beyond it, under a sky of perpetual twilight, lay a city of impossible beauty. Ethelgerd. It was a ghost. Towers of white marble and polished obsidian pierced the strange, star-dusted sky. Graceful bridges, unsupported by columns, arched over canals where the water was as still and reflective as black glass. The city was untouched by time, preserved perfectly in its dimensional bubble. There were no signs of battle, no rubble, no decay. But there was no life. No birdsong, no distant chatter, no movement. The only sound was the whisper of a wind that carried no scent. It was a breathtaking, heartbreaking mausoleum. As Ash stepped through the archway, the full, crushing weight of his memories hit him. He wasn't just remembering, he was reliving. He saw the city as it was, bustling with people and Pokemon. He heard the laughter of children playing in the grand plaza they now stood in. He smelled the bread baking in the market stalls that now stood empty. He felt the phantom touch of a hand on his shoulder and turned, half expecting to see his father, King Arian, smiling at him. Tears welled in his eyes, and for the first time since his awakening, the prince's stoicism shattered completely, leaving only the heartbroken boy behind. May, sensing his overwhelming grief, gently took his hand. He gripped it like a drowning man, the simple touch a lifeline back to the present. Misty and Dawn moved to his other side, their presence a silent, solid wall of support. This was my home, he whispered, his voice cracking. Cynthia watched, her scholarly detachment giving way to a profound, human empathy. She was walking through a history book, but for the young man before her, this was a graveyard of everyone he had ever known and loved. We need to get to the citadel, Ash said, composing himself, his grief hardening into resolve. The throne room. The royal archives were stored there. If there's any knowledge that can help us, it will be there. He led them through the silent, beautiful streets, every step an echo of a life he'd once lived. He pointed out the library where Dia had spent her days, the training grounds where he and Myrella had sparred, the gardens Myella had so lovingly tended. With every landmark, the girls felt a faint, ghostly resonance, a whisper of a memory that wasn't quite their own. The citadel was the city's heart, a spire of alabaster and gold that seemed to hold up the twilight sky. The great doors, 20 feet high and forged of a shimmering, unknown metal, stood closed. There was no lock, no handle. Allow me, Lucario said, stepping forward. He placed his palm on the door and channeled his own aura into it. The metal glowed, recognizing the signature of the prince's sworn protector, and the great doors swung inward with a sigh of ancient, dormant mechanisms. The throne room was vast and majestic. A long, blue carpet ran down the center, flanked by towering statues of legendary Pokémon. At the far end, on a raised dais, sat two thrones. One was large and ornate, the other smaller, beside it. Ash stopped at the foot of the dais, his eyes fixed on the empty seats. My father's throne, he murmured. And mine. As he spoke, the air above the king's throne shimmered. A mote of light appeared, then expanded, coalescing into a life-sized, holographic image of a man. He was tall and regal, with Ash's same unruly black hair, though his was streaked with gray at the temples. He had a kind, weary face, but his eyes held the unbreakable strength of a true king. He was dressed in royal armor, and he looked not at them, but out into the empty hall, as if addressing his court one last time. It was a recording, a final message left for whoever might find this place. If you are seeing this, King Arian's recorded voice echoed, filled with a sorrowful static, then Ethelgerd has fallen. And I, your king, am gone. But our hope is not. The image flickered. The Umbra has proven to be an enemy unlike any other. It is not a creature to be slain. It is a concept. A hunger. We have learned, at a terrible cost, that it feeds on the very energies we use to fight it. Rage, fear, the violent clash of battle, these things are not weapons against it. They are its sustenance. It turns our strength into its own. King Arian's image looked down, as if at his own hands. But we have discovered its weakness. The Umbra is a void. An absence. It cannot consume that which is whole and pure. It cannot feed on an aura of pure creation, of life, of love. It recoils from it as darkness from the sun. To fight the shadow with more shadow is to guarantee its victory. It cannot be destroyed. It must be cleansed. Purified by an act of supreme, selfless, positive energy. A light so bright it leaves no shadow to hide in. The recording was beginning to degrade. My son, Aslan, I have approved your guardian's plan. It is a desperate, terrible choice, but it is the only one we have left. May your sleep be peaceful. May you awaken in a world ready to learn from our mistakes. May you be the light that. The image dissolved into static and vanished, leaving the king's final, hopeful words hanging in the silent, cavernous hall. They had it. The key. The strategy. Not to fight the Umbra, but to heal it. A light so bright it leaves no shadow, Dawn whispered, understanding dawning in her eyes. It's not about power. It's about purity. A slow, mocking clap echoed from the shadows near the throne. Such a beautiful sentiment, a voice like poisoned honey dripped from the darkness. So noble, so naive. A pity he died for nothing. The matriarch stepped out from behind the throne, her white hair a stark contrast to the oppressive shadow that clung to her like a royal mantle. She was not alone. A dozen elite Umbra knights, clad in night black armor, emerged with her, their presence instantly changing the hall from a tomb to a trap. How did you get in here? Cynthia demanded, her hand flying to a pokeball on her belt, her Garchomp materializing beside her with a threatening roar. The matriarch smiled, a gesture that held no warmth. This place is a memory, champion. And I have more right to be here than any of you. Her cold, calculating eyes settled on Ash, and the facade of command cracked, revealing a deep, festering wound beneath. Don't you recognize me, my love? Ash stared at her. He searched the cold, imperious face, the eyes twisted by 1,000 years of resentment, and deep beneath the corruption, a memory surfaced. A memory of a different face, one that had smiled at him, laughed with him. A memory of a promise, made under a summer sky in the palace gardens. Lyra, he breathed, the name tasting like ash in his mouth. Lady Lyra, daughter of his father's most trusted general. A powerful aura user in her own right. His friend, his confidant, his betrothed. You were supposed to lead the evacuation with Lord Valen, he said, his mind reeling. You were meant to go to the eastern continent, to preserve our people. Preserve our people, she spat, the name Lyra unlocking her fury. You mean I was meant to be cast aside while you and your pets enacted your grand, secret sacrifice? I stood on the city walls and watched the sky burn, waiting for you. I fought until I collapsed, believing my prince would come. But you never did. You chose them. You chose to sleep. Her gaze flicked with venomous hatred toward Misty, May, and Dawn. You abandoned me. The truth was a brutal blow. In the chaos of the war's end, in the rush to enact the sealing, she had been overlooked. Left behind. When the city vanished, I was trapped between worlds, she continued, her voice trembling with a millennium of rage. Alone. In the dark. And something answered my call. The Umbra. It found me. It showed me the truth. Love is chaos. Hope is a lie. Only order, true, absolute, silent order, has meaning. It gave me purpose. It gave me power. It gave me 1,000 years to plan my revenge. She stepped down from the dais, her movements fluid and predatory. But now you are back. And you surround yourself with these, crude copies. Faded echoes of the women who died for you. She waved a dismissive hand at them. She is nothing. She shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at Misty. They are all just copies. I am the original. I am the one you promised yourself to. Our love was real. She stopped before him, her expression softening into a twisted mask of longing. It still can be, Aslan. Banish these echoes. Join me. The Umbra offers power, immortality, a perfect, orderly world with no pain or loss. A world we can rule together, as we were always meant to. It was a tempting poison. A promise to undo 1,000 years of pain. But Ash looked at her, at the woman his heart had once chosen, and he saw only the hollowed-out shell the Umbra had left behind. Then he looked at the 3 women standing steadfastly beside him. Misty, her jaw set, ready to be his shield. May, her hand still in his, her aura a comforting warmth. Dawn, her eyes clear, seeing the path through the coming storm. They were not copies. They were new, whole, and real. The love he felt for them was not an echo of the past, but a bright, burning song in the present. You are the echo, Lyra, he said, his voice filled not with anger, but with a profound pity. You let your love become hate. You let your pain become a cage. You are clinging to a past that is gone. He gently let go of May's hand and, in a single, definitive motion, he took Misty's, May's, and Dawn's hands in his own, linking them together in an unbreakable circle. He held their joined hands up for Lyra to see. This, he declared, his voice ringing with the clarity of a discovered truth, is real. We weren't just reborn to repeat the past. We were reborn to surpass it. You were just lost. The rejection, the finality of it, shattered the last vestiges of the woman she had been. Her face contorted into a mask of pure, murderous rage. Then you will be lost with them. She screamed, and the full force of her shadow-forged power exploded from her. The throne room erupted into a vortex of aura and shadow. Garchomp roared, meeting the charge of the Umbra Knights. Cynthia was a whirlwind of motion, a true champion in her element. But the central fight was a personal one. Lyra, her hands wreathed in dark energy, lunged at the 4 of them. You stole him from me. She shrieked at Misty, her attack a blur of shadow. Misty met the attack head-on. A shield of pure, pressurized water materialized, but Lyra's shadow blades sliced through it, the negative energy negating the physical barrier. Ash pushed Misty back, parrying the strike with a blade of his own aura. The battle was a vicious, chaotic affair in the ruins of Ash's past. Lyra's fighting style was pure, focused hatred. She ignored Ash, her attacks aimed solely at the three girls, forcing him to remain on the defensive, to protect them. It was a cruel, psychological assault. We can't win this. Dawn yelled, her visions a chaotic blur of clashing energies. We need to get the information to the others. We have to retreat. The gateway. Cynthia shouted, fighting off two knights at once. We can seal it from the other side. Ash knew she was right. To stay and fight was to die, and to let the secret of the Umbra's weakness die with them. Go. He ordered the girls. Get to the gateway. Lucario, with me. We'll cover your escape. They fled, the girls and Cynthia racing back through the grand hall while Ash and Lucario held off the enraged matriarch. The power Lyra wielded was immense, fueled by 1,000 years of bitterness. She was a force of nature, and it was all they could do to deflect her relentless attacks. They reached the shimmering archway. As the girls and Cynthia passed through, Ash and Lucario leapt back after them. Aslan! Lyra screamed, a final, agonized cry of rage and betrayal from the other side. Ash turned, his hand raised. He poured his aura into the gateway, severing the connection. The archway of light flickered, shrank, and with a final, silent implosion, vanished, leaving only the seamless granite of the cliff face behind. They were back in their own world, the cold, clean air of the silent peaks a harsh shock after the twilight stillness of Ethelgard. They had the knowledge they needed. They had the key to victory. But they had left behind an enemy whose hatred was no longer for a shadow prince, but for the three living, breathing women he had chosen over her. They had not just defeated the matriarch. They had given her a reason to live, and a reason to kill. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. The Siege of the Tree. War did not arrive with the roar of a cannon, but with the silence of a dying forest. The first sign was the birds. They stopped singing. Then, the wind, which had carried the scent of pine and wet earth, began to carry a sterile, metallic tang, like ozone and old blood. From their vantage point high on a ridge overlooking the Tree of Beginning, Ash and the others watched as a tide of darkness bled into the edges of the Cameron Range. It wasn't just an army, it was a plague. The hand of Umbra moved with chilling efficiency. They didn't storm the valley. They poisoned it. Corrupted Pokemon, their eyes glowing with the familiar sickly purple, moved as the vanguard, not in a chaotic horde, but in disciplined phalanxes. Behind them marched the Umbra Knights, their black armor absorbing the morning light, and hulking war machines that sprayed a dark, viscous ooze, killing the plant life on contact and corrupting the very soil. At the heart of this creeping blight, carried on a litter like a queen of a fallen world, was the matriarch, Lyra. But the world was ready. In the days since their return from Ethelgard, the valley around the Tree of Beginning had been transformed into a fortress. Under Ash's command, with the full logistical might of the Pokemon League, a global army had gathered. Gym leaders from every region stood shoulder to shoulder with Frontier Brains and Elite Four members. Ace trainers who had once been rivals now stood as comrades. It was a sight that would have been impossible just weeks ago, a testament to the gravity of the threat. In the central command tent, a holographic map of the battlefield flickered, showing enemy movements in real time. Ash stood at its head, no longer just a trainer, but the axis upon which the world's defense now turned. Their goal is the heart chamber, he said, his voice cutting through the tense silence. But they know we'll have it fortified. They'll try to sever the tree's energy conduits first, the three primary routes that channel the world's natural aura into its core. If they can corrupt those, the heart will be isolated and vulnerable. He indicated 3 points on the map, glowing nodes on the tree's northern, eastern, and western flanks. They'll split their main force. 1 to engage us here, at the main entrance, and 3 smaller, elite units to strike at the roots. Lance, standing beside him, nodded grimly. A classic pincer movement. How do we counter? We meet them head on, Ash declared. The main force, led by you, Stephen, Diantha, and Cynthia, will hold the front line. Do not let them advance past the river. The rest of the gym leaders and Elite Four members will form defensive perimeters around the 3 routes. He took a deep breath. But the routes themselves must be held by those who can purify the corruption as it comes. We can't just defeat them. We have to heal the damage as they inflict it. His gaze fell on Misty, May, and Dawn. The unspoken command was clear. Their role was not to be beside him, but to be his lieutenants in the field, the linchpins of the entire defense. Misty, he said, his voice softening slightly, the western route runs alongside the underground river that feeds the tree. That's your domain. Take a contingent of water-type specialists and hold that channel. Don't let a single drop of poison get through. Misty met his gaze, her own eyes fierce with determination. She gave a single, sharp nod. No one gets past me. May, the eastern route is embedded deep in the earth, drawing power from the bedrock of the continent itself. I need you and a team of ground and grass type users there. Keep the land strong. Don't let them sever our connection to it. They won't even get close, May promised, her quiet confidence a solid, grounding presence in the room. Dawn, he finished, turning to her. The northern route is the most vulnerable. It's close to the nexus point of the mountains, where the veil is thin. They'll hit it with everything they have, trying to create a smaller dimensional rift to flank us. You'll need to see their attacks before they happen. Take the psychic and flying type specialists. You're our early warning system and our surgical strike force. Dawn's eyes flickered for a moment, processing a dozen immediate futures. Their commander at the northern route will use a Gengar to try and phase through our defenses. I'll be ready for it. It was the hardest decision he'd ever had to make. Every instinct screamed at him to keep them close, to protect them. But the prince knew that to win a war, you had to trust your strongest soldiers to hold the most critical positions. He walked over to them, away from the prying eyes of the other commanders. Be careful, he said, his voice low, for them alone. You taught us how to be more than that, Misty replied, placing a hand on his arm. You taught us how to be guardians. We'll hold our ground until you've finished this, May added, her hand joining Misty's. I see the path, Dawn said, her hand completing the circle. It's difficult. But it ends with the four of us, together. He wanted to say more, to tell them everything the sight of them going into danger did to him, but there was no time. The ground began to tremble. The battle had begun. The world erupted into a storm of sound and fury. Beams of ice, fire, and lightning crisscrossed the valley. The roars of 100 different Pokémon blended into a single, deafening chorus of war. The main front at the river became a churning meat grinder, where the champion's elite Pokémon clashed with corrupted monstrosities and Umbra war machines. Dragonite's hyper beam met a torrent of shadow energy and exploded, shaking the very mountains. The battles at the roots were smaller but no less desperate. Misty stood knee-deep in the rushing current of the underground river, her Gyarados and Starmie leading a team that included trainers like Crasher, Wake and Juan. As the Umbra Knights tried to pour their black ooze into the water, she raised her hands, and her cerulean aura flared. A solid wall of pure, churning water erupted, catching the poison and, through her will alone, separating it from the river's flow, shunting the sludge into a contained whirlpool. On the eastern flank, May stood on a hilltop, her hands pressed to the earth. Below her, trainers like Gardenia and Ramos fought a brutal battle against Umbra Knights whose Pokémon were tearing up the ground. Hold on, May yelled. Her golden-green aura sank into the soil, and the ground itself came to their aid. The earth hardened beneath the allies' feet, giving them better footing, while turning to grasping mud under the enemy. Thick, ancient roots, as hard as iron, burst forth to ensnare and crush the advancing corrupted Pokémon. She wasn't just a trainer, she was the immune system of the planet itself. At the northern route, Dawn was a whirlwind of precognitive action. Wallace, 3 o'clock, shadow ball from the Gengar in the cliff face. She would yell, and the Hoenn champion's Melodic would already be firing a counter-ice beam. Faulkner, above you. Crobat using cross poison. The young gym leader's Pidgeot would break off its attack and intercept the threat a split second before it happened. She was the nerve center of her entire flank, her mind a dozen steps ahead of the enemy, turning the battle into a perfectly executed dance of destruction. While the Guardians held their sectors, Ash and Lucario raced through the chaos towards the tree's heart. The main entrance was a scene of carnage, but the path to the central chamber was eerily quiet. Too quiet. It's a trap, Ash said, slowing as they entered the familiar, carved tunnels. He is waiting, Lucario confirmed. They entered the heart chamber to find it empty, save for one figure. Valerius stood before the great central crystal, which pulsed with a healthy blue light. His Metagross floated silently beside him. He was no longer the broken, confused man who had fled Mt. Chimney. His hollow eyes had been filled again, not with faith or understanding, but with a cold, sharp shard of pure, distilled hatred. So, the prince deigns to face me himself, Valerius sneered. Or did you simply run out of women to hide behind? Lyra sent you here to die, Valerius, Ash said, his voice echoing in the chamber. You're a diversion. A sacrifice. The matriarch gave me a purpose, Valerius shot back. She reminded me of my honor. My family's legacy is to oppose you, the coward who abandoned his post. The world you fight for is messy, chaotic, and weak. The world she offers is one of perfect order and strength. There is no greater purpose than that. There's no life in her world. Ash argued, taking a step forward. No love, no choice. It's an empty, silent prison. Is that what your ancestor, a hero who died to save innocent people, would have wanted for a legacy? Do not speak his name. Valerius roared, the final, raw nerve touched. You are not worthy. This ends now. My legacy will be carved from your failure. The duel began. It was not like the battle outside. It was intimate, ideological, and brutally personal. Pikachu and Metagross clashed in the center of the room, a whirlwind of steel and lightning. But the real fight was between the two men. Ash and Lucario engaged Valerius directly, aura against aura. Valerius fought with a cold, empty fury, his movements precise and deadly. He channeled his aura into blades of psychic energy, forcing Ash and Lucario into a desperate defense. He fought for an idea, for the abstract concept of order. Ash was different. He drew his strength not from an idea, but from a connection. With every blow he parried, every blast of energy he deflected, he thought of Misty holding a river against a tide of poison. He thought of May, her hands buried in the soil, becoming the mountain's will. He thought of Dawn, her mind a burning star navigating the shoals of time. He was not just fighting for them, he was fighting with them. Their love, their trust, their shared soul was the source of his power. And it was purer, stronger, and more enduring than Valerius's borrowed hate. You don't understand, do you, Valerius? Ash panted, locking an aura blade with his opponent's. Strength isn't about control. It's about trust. It's about connection. The chaos you hate so much, that's life. That's freedom. That's love. He pushed back, and his aura flared, no longer just blue, but tinged with the cerulean, gold, and white of his guardians. It was the bond-forged power Cynthia had spoken of, and it overwhelmed Valerius's solitary rage. Ash shattered his psychic blade and, with a single, precise strike of his own solidified aura, slammed Valerius against the chamber wall, disarming him. Pikachu, at the same moment, unleashed a thunderous volt tackle that sent Metagross crashing to the ground, unconscious. Valerius slumped to the floor, defeated, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The hatred in his eyes was replaced by the same shattered confusion as before. How? Because my world is worth fighting for, Ash said, walking toward him, his hand outstretched. Yours is just an escape from pain. Suddenly, a voice, dripping with amused contempt, echoed from the chamber's entrance. Oh, well done. You made him sad. You always were so good at speeches. Lyra glided into the room, her expression one of cold satisfaction. She surveyed the scene, the defeated Valerius, the triumphant Ash. Lyra, Ash snarled, turning to face her. It's over. Oh, my dear Aslan, she purred, it has just begun. She looked at Valerius, who was staring at her with a mixture of hope and fear. You have failed me, Valerius. But you always had one last purpose to serve. You will make a fine sacrifice. Before Ash could react, she moved. She was a blur of shadow, appearing behind the kneeling Valerius. A wicked-looking blade of pure, black energy materialized in her hand. Valerius's eyes went wide with horrified understanding. Matriarch. No, he whispered. Thank you for your service, she said, and plunged the shadow blade into his back. Valerius gasped, a choked, wet sound. He stared at Ash, his eyes pleading, the final, terrible truth of his manipulation dawning in his last moments. Lyra placed a hand on his head, and her own aura flared with a black, consuming light. She began to drain him. His life force, his powerful aura, was pulled from his body in screaming, visible streams of light, flowing into her. His body convulsed and then went limp, a discarded vessel. But Lyra didn't stop. Now supercharged, she slammed her other hand onto the great crystal heart of the tree. The tree's power, a warrior's soul, and a matriarch's will. She screamed, her voice distorting, becoming something vast and terrible. The perfect fuel for the perfect doorway. The chamber began to shake violently. The healthy blue glow of the crystal flickered, and a spiderweb of black cracks spread across its surface. Lyra threw her head back and laughed as the energy of the tree and the last vestiges of Valerius's soul were channeled through her, fired like a beam into the ceiling of the cavern. High above, miles in the sky over the raging battle, the clouds began to swirl into a massive vortex. Reality itself started to fray. With a sound like the world tearing in two, a black rift began to rip open in the sky, a wound in the firmament leading directly into the endless, hungry dark of the Umbra's dimension. Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. The God in the Glass. Outside, the war stopped. It did not end in victory or defeat, but simply ceased, as if a celestial hand had pressed pause on the world. The cacophony of 100 clashing Pokemon, the shouts of trainers, the explosions of energy, all of it was swallowed by a sudden, profound, and terrifying silence. Every human, every Pokemon on the battlefield, from Lance's mighty Dragonite to a trainer's terrified Rattata, froze, their eyes drawn upward to the bleeding wound in the sky. The rift was no longer just a tier. It was a gateway, and something was coming through. It had no single shape. It was a living mountain of shadow and malice, a tsunami of non-existence pouring into their dimension. It was a flowing, formless horror that blotted out the sun, its edges constantly shifting, coalescing into phantom limbs and screaming faces before dissolving back into the roiling chaos of its being. It was the Umbra, the God in the Glass. But the most terrifying part was not what they saw. It was what they felt. A psychic presence of such immense, nihilistic despair washed over the valley that it was a physical blow. It was the crushing weight of a billion dying stars, the cold of a universe without life, the agony of an eternity spent starving in a void. It was pure, unadulterated hopelessness. Cynthius Garchomp, a creature that had faced gods of time and space, let out a terrified whine and tried to burrow into the earth. Stevens Metagross, a supercomputer of logic and power, went rigid, its psychic abilities short-circuiting in the face of an entity whose existence was a paradox. Across the valley, Pokemon were overwhelmed, fainting where they stood or cowering in fear. Trainers collapsed to their knees, clutching their heads as the Umbra's psychic scream tore through their minds, showing them visions of their own worst fears, of a world consumed by an endless, silent dark. The champions, the strongest mortals in the world, were rendered utterly powerless, paralyzed by a despair so absolute it felt like the only truth in the universe. In the heart chamber, Ash and Lucario felt the psychic wave, but the tree's own aura provided a fragile shield. Lyra, however, thrived in it. She spread her arms wide, a messianic figure bathed in the anti-light of her god. Her body had changed, the dark energy she'd absorbed from Valerius and the tree causing her form to shimmer and distort, her skin turning a deathly pale, her eyes now solid orbs of black. "Behold, Aslan!" she cried, her voice now a horrifying chorus of her own and something much older, much darker. "The true order. The final, perfect silence. The world you failed, remade in my image." Ash stared, not at her, but past her, at the growing rift and the entity it unleashed. He felt its nature. King Arian's words echoed in his mind, a beacon in the storm of despair. It is not a creature to be slain. It is a concept, a hunger. It must be cleansed. To fight it with aura spheres and thunderbolts would be like trying to punch the ocean. They would be feeding it, strengthening it with their conflict. There was only one way. His father's way. The path of supreme, selfless, positive energy. It was a suicide mission. A plan so desperate it made sealing himself away for 1,000 years seem like a minor inconvenience. But it was the only path Dawn's visions had shown, the single, razor-thin thread of hope. He closed his eyes, shutting out the chaos, and reached out not with his voice, but with the bond-forged union he shared with his guardians. He sent a single, clear thought, a message of pure intent, across their shared soul space. "Misty, May, Dawn, I know what we have to do. And I won't ask it of you." He felt their minds receive it, 3 distinct points of light in the encroaching darkness. And their replies came back, not as words, but as feelings, as instantaneous and certain as a heartbeat. Misty's was a surge of fierce, unwavering loyalty, a shield not of water but of absolute resolve. You don't have to ask. May's was a wave of gentle, profound empathy, a deep well of love that pushed back against the Umbra's despair. We're with you, Ash. All the way. Dawn's was a flash of crystalline certainty, a vision of this exact moment, of their 4 souls intertwined. We already know. This is why we're here. He opened his eyes. The battle outside was lost. The world was on its knees. But here, in this chamber, hope was not just alive, it was preparing to fight back. He knew they were coming. And a moment later, they were there, bursting into the chamber, their faces pale and strained from fighting through the psychic onslaught, but their eyes burning with an unbreakable fire. It's over, Lyra, Ash said, his voice ringing with a newfound calm. Lyra turned, her monstrous form convulsing in a bitter, mocking laugh. Over. My dear, you are the epilogue to a story I have already finished. Your friends are here for a front row seat to the birth of a new, silent world. Ash walked to the center of the room, turning his back on her, and faced his guardians. Misty, May, and Dawn moved to meet him, their steps perfectly synchronized, their purposes one. They stood before each other, the dying light of the crystal heart casting long shadows around them. It's a suicide mission, Ash said, his voice for them alone. The plan, we have to pour everything we are, all of our aura, all of our light, directly into its core. It will either purify the entity, as my father hoped, or it will vaporize us. Misty looked at him, and her usual fiery retort was replaced by a soft, fierce smile. 1,000 years ago, we died for you, she said, her voice steady and clear. It was our duty. May stepped closer, her hand finding Misty's. This time, she added, her voice filled with a warmth that defied the chilling despair, we fight with you. As equals. Dawn completed their circle, taking May's other hand, her own eyes glowing with the faint, white light of her power. And we win, she finished, her voice resonating with the absolute certainty of a seer who has already witnessed their victory. It was not a conquest. It was not a harem claimed. It was a single, unbreakable bond forged across 2 lifetimes, a love that had transcended time and death itself. It was their true, and final, weapon. So sentimental, Lyra sneered from behind them. Your love will be the first thing this new world forgets. Ignoring her, Ash reached out, taking Dawn's and Misty's free hands. The circle was complete. The 4 of them were linked, a human conduit for a divine purpose. Now, Ash whispered. And the light came. It began as a soft glow from their joined hands, then erupted into a blinding, magnificent beacon of pure, golden blue light. It was a sun, born in the heart of the dying tree. It was not a light of destructive power, but of pure, unadulterated creation. Their individual auras, Misty's fluid blue, May's earthy gold, Dawn's crystalline white, and Ash's foundational indigo, swirled together, weaving into a single, unified harmonic of impossible energy. They poured everything they were into that light. Not just their aura, but their very souls. Ash poured in his boundless kindness, his unwavering belief in the good of others. Misty poured in her fierce, unshakable loyalty, her absolute devotion to those she loved. May poured in her gentle empathy, her ability to heal wounds both physical and spiritual. Dawn poured in her unshakable confidence, her faith in a brighter future. It was their love, their hope, their friendship, their shared history, weaponized into its purest form. They projected this pure, combined soul not as a beam, but as a wave, a cleansing tide of pure reality aimed at the heart of the unreality that was the Umbra. Lyra screamed, a sound of pure rage and disbelief. No. Its power is absolute. Your pathetic light is nothing. She lunged forward, a vortex of pure shadow surrounding her, intending to intercept them, to smother their light with her darkness. But she had built her entire being on hate, pain, and a thirst for control. The pure, selfless energy of their bond was a concept so alien to her corrupted soul that it was utterly toxic. As she entered the radius of their light, she didn't just burn. She was unmade. Her shadow form dissolved, her borrowed power stripped away. For a single, fleeting instant, she was just Lyra again, a lost, terrified woman, her eyes wide with the horror of her own emptiness. And then, she was gone, vaporized into nothing but a fading wisp of regret, erased by the very love she had forsaken. The wave of pure energy, unimpeded, shot up through the chamber and into the heart of the umbra hanging in the sky. For a moment, there was a perfect silence. Then, the entity of shadow screamed. It was a sound that was not a sound, a psychic shriek that shattered mountains and boiled rivers. It was the sound of a void being filled, of a concept being forcibly rewritten. The light spread through its form like a divine contagion, not destroying the shadow, but transmuting it, purifying its darkness, healing its eternal hunger. The roiling blackness was shot through with veins of brilliant gold, the screaming faces in its form softening into expressions of peaceful release. The hungry god, the endless void, was being given a soul. The rift in the sky became unstable. The purified energy was too much for the dimensional wound to contain. With a final, silent, ground-shaking implosion, the umbra collapsed in on itself. The rift sealed, snapping shut with a thunderclap that echoed across the globe, leaving behind nothing but a clear, blue sky and a rising sun. Chapter 9 End. Chapter 10. The Unbroken Dawn. The first thing Ash was aware of was the silence. Not the oppressive, dead silence of Ethelgard, but a deep, living quiet, filled with the gentle hum of a world breathing a sigh of relief. The psychic scream of the umbra was gone, its lingering echo of despair replaced by an overwhelming sense of peace. He felt hollowed out, scraped clean. His aura, usually a roaring fire within him, was now a single, warm ember, guttering but alive. He lay on his back, the cool, damp earth of a massive crater a comforting anchor. His bones felt like they were made of lead, his muscles like frayed rope. He managed to turn his head, the simple movement an act of supreme effort. Misty, May, and Dawn lay near him, a tangle of limbs and exhaustion, their chests rising and falling in the shallow, even rhythm of deep sleep. They were alive. They were whole. Nothing else mattered. A single, brilliant ray of light pierced the morning haze, striking the center of the crater. The sun was rising. It was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. The unbroken dawn. He must have drifted off, because the next thing he knew, voices were echoing from the crater's rim. He pushed himself up onto one elbow, his vision swimming. Figures were descending into the basin, their steps hesitant, as if walking on hallowed ground. He recognized Lance's crimson cape, Cynthia's black coat. The champions. Their faces were a mixture of awe, disbelief, and profound, overwhelming relief. The psychic despair had lifted from them, too. By the gods, Stephen Stone whispered, his usually cool demeanor shattered as he surveyed the scene. The four teenagers, drained but alive, at the epicenter of an event that had saved the world. Cynthia was the first to reach them, kneeling beside Dawn, her hand gently checking for a pulse. She looked up at Ash, and her analytical gray eyes were filled with a moisture she didn't bother to hide. You did it, she said, her voice trembling slightly. You actually did it. Lance stood over them, a giant of a man rendered speechless. He looked from the clear, blue sky, to the four heroes, to the tree of beginning, which was already beginning to pulse with a renewed, vibrant life. He took off his cape and, in a gesture of ultimate respect, draped it over the sleeping forms of the three girls. The world owes you a debt it can never repay, he said, his voice thick with an emotion Ash had never heard from him before. Whatever you need, anything, it's yours. Weeks passed. The world exhaled. The hand of Umbra, its leadership decapitated and its god purified, crumbled into disorganized, fleeing remnants that were easily captured by the mobilized forces of the League. The corrupted Pokemon were gently healed, the poisoned lands slowly began to recover. The story, or a heavily sanitized version of it, was released to the public. A rogue organization had attempted to misuse a newly discovered form of energy, but had been stopped by the combined efforts of the world's champions, led by a small, heroic team of special trainers. Aura was no longer a myth. Across the globe, stories began to emerge of children suddenly able to sense the feelings of Pokemon, of trainers discovering a latent ability to push a little harder, to connect a little deeper. The world was changing, awakening to a potential it had long forgotten. For Ash, Misty, May, and Dawn, these weeks were a time of quiet recovery. They stayed at the rejuvenated tree of beginning, which had become a global symbol of hope. The tree itself seemed to sing with gratitude, its leaves a brighter green, its crystalline heart a steady, brilliant blue that could be seen for miles. Ash felt the change in himself most keenly. The war between the prince and the trainer was over. There was no division, no conflict. Aslan's memories, his tactical brilliance, his regal bearing, they were now simply part of him, as natural as his love for Pikachu or his unyielding optimism. He was complete, a soul reforged and made whole, stronger and wiser than either of his previous incarnations had been alone. He found the three of them in a quiet, sun-dappled glade near the tree's base, a place where a small, clear stream chuckled over smooth stones. They were sitting together, not talking, but simply existing in the comfortable silence that had become their new normal. He walked over, the soft grass muffling his footsteps, and sat down with them, completing their circle. The war was over. The world was safe. But a final, unspoken question hung in the peaceful air between them. A question about the future. About what they were, now that the crisis that had defined them was gone. Ash looked at each of them in turn. At Misty, her fiery spirit now tempered by a deep, tidal strength. At May, her gentle kindness now rooted in the unshakable power of the earth itself. At Dawn, her bright confidence now illuminated by the infinite wisdom of her visions. He saw not just the girls he had grown up with, but the women they had become, the ancient guardians they had always been. "I love you," he said, his voice quiet but clear, carrying the weight of 1,000 years and the simple honesty of a boy from Pallet Town. He looked at all three of them, his gaze open, his heart undefended. "I love who you were. And I love, so much, who you are." The confession settled between them, a truth finally given voice. Misty was the first to speak, her gaze fixed on the stream, a faint blush on her cheeks. "It's not normal, Ash." It was a statement of fact, not a judgment. The world they lived in had rules for these things, for how hearts were meant to work. What they had, what they were, didn't fit into any of them. May smiled, a gentle, knowing expression on her face as she reached out, her hand finding Misty's. "Neither are we," she said softly. Her words were a quiet declaration of independence, an acceptance of their unique, shared soul. They had never been normal. And they didn't have to be. Dawn, who had been watching him with her strangely timeless eyes, laughed, a light, crystalline sound that was pure joy. "I saw this," she said, her voice filled with a happy certainty. "A long, long time ago. Standing on a peak, in the middle of a storm, I saw this clearing. I saw us, right here, just like this." She looked around the circle, her gaze finally resting on Ash, her smile brilliant. "And I wouldn't have it any other way. It wasn't a conquest. It was a covenant. A conscious, willing choice made by four souls who had been forged into one in the heart of a dying world." Ash reached out, and they met him in the middle, their hands joining in the center of their circle. A shield, a voice, a vision, and a heart. Complete. Their future was an unwritten page, but they would write it together. There were new aura sensitives to guide, a world to help heal, and a fragile piece to protect. Their grand, epic battle was over. But their adventure, the true adventure of living and loving in the unbroken dawn of a world they had saved, was just beginning. Chapter 10 End.